I don't think I ever believed in ghosts until the desert tried to make me one. The first time I saw it, the ghost town looked like a painting, like something someone had abandoned halfway through, then left to bake in the Arizona sun. Boards curled like brittle parchment. Windows were blown out. Rust bled down from every nail and hinge. It didn't look haunted. It looked forgotten. But forgotten things remember you when you stay too long. My name's Nate. I'm 33. I've been living out of my old 91 Volkswagen Vanagon for the better part of 3 years now. The kind with a pop-top, checkered seats, and an engine that sounds like a smoker wheezing up a hill. I'm not new to the road. I've camped everywhere from deep Oregon forests to Mississippi swamps. I've parked next to suspicious strangers, heard coyotes scream at 2 a.m., even had a mountain lion circle my van once in the dark. But nothing rattled me like what happened near Chloride Flats, Arizona. It was late October, which in the high desert means sharp days and freezing nights. I'd just come off a week of traveling through Sedona and needed quiet. Real quiet. The kind you can only find when you lose cell signal and the road narrows to gravel. A local I met at a gas station, mid-60s, thick Navajo accent, skin like tanned leather, told me about the place. Said it was a ghost town. Said I'd be left alone. His name was Ellis. He had one blind eye and warned me, half joking, "Don't go after dark. Spirits don't like visitors." He chuckled when he said it, but the way his good eye didn't move, it made me hesitate. I should have listened. I found the town right where he said it'd be, about 9 miles off the main highway, down an unmarked dirt path that coiled through scrub brush and forgotten mining land. You wouldn't even know it was there unless someone told you. No road signs, no fences, just open desert that suddenly bled into the bones of something old. I rolled to a stop in front of what must have once been the main street, 2 rows of collapsed structures facing each other like tired old men. A saloon on one side, an old post office on the other. A crumbling schoolhouse down the way. Everything was covered in that desert dust that turns gold at sunset, like time had swept over it and then never returned. I parked near the church, barely standing, just frame and splinters. There was no roof left, but the bell tower was intact. Funny thing, there wasn't a bell inside, just the crossbeam where it should have hung, swaying gently in the wind like something was still hanging there anyway. No cell signal. No other vehicles. No footprints in the dirt, but mine. Perfect. I should have left then. But the quiet was what I'd been craving. No generators, no highway, just the slow breath of the desert wind and the occasional creak of old wood baking in the sun. I made camp, popped the top of the van, pulled out my little propane stove, and started boiling water for pasta. As it cooked, I wandered between buildings, taking pictures, brushing dust off old signs. I found an old photograph nailed to a beam inside what used to be the sheriff's office. Faded faces, all men, some with wide-brimmed hats, others in suits, all staring straight ahead. No smiles, no names. I don't know why, but I took it down, folded it up, slipped it into the pocket of my jacket like some kind of souvenir. By the time I got back to the van, the sun was dipping hard behind the mesas, painting everything in oranges and blood reds. The temperature dropped like a trapdoor. I pulled on a hoodie, ate my dinner, and tried to settle in for the night. But the silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was too quiet. No wind, no birds, just stillness, like the whole town was holding its breath. Then I heard the bell, clear, hollow, distant. I froze mid-bite. My van was parked right beside the church tower. I'd checked it. There was no bell. But I'd heard it, 3 soft chimes spaced slow and deliberate like a funeral call. I stood up fast, head grazing the pop-top, and stepped outside. Nothing moved. The sky had turned that deep blue-black, stars spilling out like someone had broken a jar of glitter overhead. No footsteps, no lights, no one. Just the bell sound again, closer this time. I swear to God, I looked up and there it was, a shadow, swinging, just for a second. At the top of the bell tower, long and thin. Not a rope, not wind, something, swaying. I blinked and it was gone. My breath clouded in the air. My ears were straining and all I could hear was my own pulse. I told myself it was stress, long drive, thin air, Maybe I was seeing things. I'd driven almost 9 hours that day and had barely eaten. Maybe the photo I took had gotten in my head. Old places do that. So I locked up the van, zipped up my sleeping bag, and tried to sleep it off. But sleep doesn't come easy when the ground feels like it's listening. I woke up around 1:40 a.m., my watch buzzed with a reminder I forgot to turn off. When I reached to silence it, I realized something was wrong. My van door was open, not wide, just cracked, about 6 inches, enough for cold air to pour in. I know I locked it. My first instinct was to grab the flashlight. My second instinct was to stay absolutely still. I listened. There was a sound. Dry, like footsteps on gravel, but not the rhythmic crunch of boots. It was irregular. Shuffle. Pause. Shuffle. Right outside. I sat up slowly, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, clicked it on. Light stabbed the darkness outside the van, empty. But then I saw them. Not footprints, drag marks, parallel lines like someone had been crawling or being dragged toward the back of the church, disappearing into the shadow where the tower loomed. I shut the door, locked it, crawled into the driver's seat without even unfolding the bed. I told myself I'd leave first thing at sunrise, but I didn't, because something didn't let me. At exactly 3:03 a.m., I heard the whispering. Not voices I could understand, not English, not Spanish, just syllables, wet like someone talking through water, low and rhythmic. They weren't outside. They were coming from beneath the van. It took every shred of reason I had not to throw open the door and run screaming into the desert. But I didn't. I froze. Listened. There were no footsteps, no rustling, just that low, churning whisper rising from beneath me, like someone was talking directly into the undercarriage of the van. A humming, garbled prayer. Words I couldn't decipher, spoken in a tone that wasn't meant to be heard by anything living. I reached for the keys. My hand shook so hard I could barely grip them. I turned them in the ignition. Click, click. Nothing. Not even a cough. My heart sank. The battery wasn't dead. It was drained, like something had pulled the life right out of it. I tried again. Nothing. Then the whispering stopped. Just gone. I didn't breathe. Didn't blink. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, counting seconds. 10. 20. 30. Silence. And then thump! Something slammed against the side of the van. Hard. I screamed. Instinctively hit the horn. It blared like a wounded animal, echoing through the ruins of the town. Another thump, this time on the roof. Then the soft sound of weight shifting overhead, like someone crawling across it on hands and knees. I flicked the flashlight beam out the side window, scanning wildly. Dust. Broken walls. Nothing else. But the roof creaked again. Closer now. I looked up. The pop-top canvas above my bed was pressed down, like something was leaning on it from outside. That broke me. I threw myself into the back of the van, shoved open the rear hatch, and bolted barefoot into the freezing night. I didn't think about where I was running. I just moved, past the busted church, through the skeleton of what might have once been a general store, over cracked boards and glass, cutting my feet. I didn't stop until I collapsed behind the wall of the old saloon, gasping for air, blood pounding in my ears. And then I heard it again. The bell. One clean chime, followed by the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Right down the main street. I pressed myself against the saloon wall, biting my hand to stay silent. The footsteps got louder, then stopped. I couldn't help myself. I peeked, and there it was, standing in front of my van. A figure. Not quite man. Not quite shadow. It was draped in something tattered and long, like it had once been cloth but had dried stiff like old leather. Its head was tilted too far to one side, like the neck was broken or didn't know how to hold itself up. Arms hung limp, no face I could see, just void. It stood there, completely still, and then it turned too smoothly and looked directly at me. Not at the saloon, not at the street. At me. Even in the dark, I felt it lock eyes. It didn't move, didn't chase. It just lifted one hand and pointed right at me. I turned and ran so hard I nearly blacked out. My lungs burned. My legs went numb. I stumbled through ruins, past rusted machinery and half-buried mine shafts. I didn't look back. I found a narrow canyon just beyond the far edge of the town, nothing but shale and dry scrub. I dropped into it and curled up beneath an outcropping, pulling my hoodie over my head like it could shield me from something ancient and wrong. I must have passed out because when I woke up, the sun was rising. The sky was pale gold, cloudless. The wind had picked up again, brushing through creosote and cactus. The air felt lighter. But the town behind me still stood. I waited until it was full daylight before creeping back. Every step was a war with my gut. But when I got back to where I'd left the van, it was untouched. No dents, no scratches. All the doors closed. The battery, fine, started on the first try. No sign of drag marks, no bell, no figure. Except my hoodie, the one I'd worn all night. It was folded neatly on the driver's seat. I hadn't taken it off. And the photograph I'd stuffed in the pocket, gone. In its place was something else. A playing card. The Queen of Spades. The face scratched out with tiny, deliberate X's. I left. Didn't even put the van in park until I hit pavement again. Didn't stop driving until I reached a full campground 4 hours south that crowded with generators and kids on bikes and every sound I used to find annoying. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. Didn't tell anyone for weeks. And when I finally called Ellis, the man who'd pointed me there, I asked him straight out, what happened in that town? All he said was, shouldn't have taken anything. They don't like to be remembered. And then he hung up. I've been back on the road since, still in the Vanagon, still living the life, still chasing sunsets. But every now and then, when the desert is too quiet or the wind shifts strange, I check the rear view because sometimes I swear I see her, the figure, tilting, waiting. And when I hear bells now, church, train, whatever, I listen for the second chime because it's never just one. And if I ever hear 3, I'm not staying to see what follows. I didn't drive at night for a long time after that. I'd park early wherever there were lights, dogs, voices. A guy like me used to crave solitude. But after Chloride Flats, that solitude had teeth. It watched from corners. It whispered through dry branches and dragged long shadows across my windshield. Still, a man can't run forever. Not when the road is home. And over time, I started convincing myself I just cracked a little under pressure. Sleep deprivation, desert psychosis, an old town and a wild imagination. I tried to rationalize it all back into the real world. But the problem with pretending something didn't happen is that it just waits for you to drop your guard again. And I did. It was mid-November by then. I was somewhere between Globe and the Superstition Mountains. I'd planned to meet up with another van lifer, Lena, mid-20s, solo traveler, fierce as hell with a love for forgotten places. We'd crossed paths a few times before, always swapped coordinates for backcountry sites, and she'd mentioned a remote spot she found through an old mining map. Says it's past a place called Stanton's Bend, she told me. Might have been a trading post back in the 1800s. Doesn't even show up on Google Maps. I hesitated when I heard that. Places that don't show up on maps. But I didn't want to sound like a coward. Besides, she was already there. Said it was stunning. Desert but near water, an old spring-fed creek with cottonwoods still hanging on despite the season. She said the town ruins were barely visible now. Just the bones of an old well, a brick chimney, some collapsed wooden planks. But that was enough to stop me in my tracks. A well, a chimney, planks. That's all that was left of the church in Chloride Flats. I asked her if she saw any photos. She laughed. No buildings standing, nothing like that. It's beautiful, peaceful. She paused, then added, but the place is weirdly still at night. I nearly bailed, thought about making some excuse. But a voice in me, the same one that had ignored the bell, that told me to take the photo in the first place, said, go. See for yourself. So I did. By the time I arrived, Lena had already set up camp. She had a fire going, and her dog, Taz, a 3-legged mutt that adored people, was curled up by the coals. The sun was dipping, painting the desert in that familiar orange glow, softening everything except the edges of my nerves. Lena waved me over. Did you get lost? You look pale. I didn't answer right away, just scanned the area, and I swear, even in daylight, the place felt hollow. Not dead. Not evil. Just like it didn't belong in this world anymore, like it had slipped through time and was just waiting to be noticed again. We made small talk, cooked some beans and tortillas over the fire, passed around a metal flask of cheap whiskey. I wanted to feel normal. I really did. But I kept glancing toward the shadow where the tree line began. The cottonwoods looked like they were leaning just slightly toward us. Not because of the wind. There was no wind, just silence. Too much of it. Taz growled once that night. We were both half asleep in our vans, and I heard him snarl, low, guttural, protective. I peeked through the window. Nothing. No coyotes. No rustling brush. But he was up, ears sharp, hackles raised, staring into the trees. Then he whimpered. That's what scared me the most. He backed away from the door and whimpered like a kicked dog, then bolted under Lena's van and wouldn't come out until morning. She thought maybe he saw a javelina or a bobcat. I nodded, pretended to agree. But I didn't believe it. And when I stepped out that morning to stretch my legs, I saw it, there near the fire pit, in the dirt, the Queen of Spades. Same as before, only this time it wasn't scratched. It was clean, crisp, like it had just been pulled from a brand new deck. I didn't tell Lena, I just stared at it. And I remembered something Ellis said just before he hung up the phone that night. They don't like to be remembered. But what if that wasn't a warning? What if it was a rule? You remember them and they remember you. You carry a piece of them with you, even after you leave, like a card in your pocket. I took that queen and buried it under a rock. Deep. Then I packed up and told Lena I had to head out early. Bad feeling, maybe something with the van. She didn't argue, but as I drove off, she stood there beside her van, watching. And for just a second, I swear her shadow stretched in the wrong direction, like it wasn't hers. After Stanton's Bend, I stopped checking coordinates people sent me. I avoided ghost towns, mining routes, anything off map. I stuck to the boring places, KOAs, paved turnouts, campgrounds full of screaming toddlers and generator noise, the stuff I used to roll my eyes at. But even in those places, I didn't sleep quite right. The desert doesn't let go of you that easy. It's not just the land. It's the memory of the land. It holds on. It lingers like dust behind your eyes, like the aftertaste of water drawn too deep from the ground. And once it's seen you, really seen you, you don't get to forget. 3 months passed. I told myself I was okay. I told other people I was okay. I even convinced myself to start filming again, shooting van tour videos and campsite tips, trying to stitch my normal life back together. And then I met Ray. Mid-60s, weather-beaten, had that look of a guy who's lived longer than he expected to. We crossed paths at a ranger-run site in southeastern Arizona, just shy of the Chiricahuas. He had a beat-up white Westphalia that looked like it had been resurrected more than once. We got to talking, comparing rigs, sharing coffee. He asked where I'd been lately. I rattled off the safe stuff. Quartzsite, Patagonia Lake, Kofa. He squinted at me. You didn't pass through Chloride Flats, did you? I froze. That name, he said it. I never told him. I asked, why? Ray gave a slow nod, as if I'd already answered. They don't tell you the old story, do they? He said. I didn't respond. He continued anyway. Whole town disappeared once, in 1912. That's the part folks forget. There was a church collapse, a mine explosion, and then for 3 days, no one could find it. Not even the Army scouts. It was like the whole damn place just dropped off the map. Then it showed back up, but the people weren't right anymore. Not quite. He took a sip of his coffee. Only thing left standing was the church bell tower. I asked him what happened to it. He smiled like it wasn't funny. Collapsed again in '56. No reason. No quake. Just folded in on itself. Since then, no one builds anything where the church stood. They say the ground won't take it, like it remembers. I couldn't shake the chill that ran through me. Ray looked at me carefully. You took something, didn't you? That question hit me like a blow. I nodded. He exhaled sharply, like that confirmed everything. They don't follow you for souvenirs. They follow you for recognition, for the sin of not forgetting. You ever wonder why some places vanish from maps? I didn't answer. Ray did it for me. It's a kindness. I left the campground the next morning. Didn't say goodbye. didn't look back, but I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. Recognition. That word rang in my head like the bell itself. Weeks passed. Then I got the email from Lena. The subject line was blank. The message was short. Something's wrong with Taz. Won't go outside. Keeps whining at the van door. Can't sleep. I'm back in Phoenix. Can we talk? There was an attachment, an audio file. I clicked it. Static at first, then a rustle, wind maybe. Then chime, one single bell tone, hollow, perfectly clear. Then Lena's voice, soft and trembling. It's the same sound. I know you heard it too. I went back. I shouldn't have. My stomach flipped. She'd gone back. The place we promised ourselves we'd never return to. I called her immediately. No answer. Tried again. Straight to voicemail. I didn't know what to do. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe I felt guilty. Maybe I thought I could undo something by facing it again. Maybe I just didn't want to run anymore. I drove back to Chloride Flats. This time I came prepared. I brought salt. Old miner folklore says it repels spirits that linger near Earth. I brought iron nails too. My grandfather swore by them when we lived near a haunted mill in upstate New York. Said spirits hated iron. I don't even know if I believed in that stuff, but belief didn't matter anymore. Fear did. The town was still there, still ruined, still watching. I parked the van outside the boundary where the gravel turned to dust. I didn't want the tires to touch the town itself. And I walked. I didn't go at night. I wasn't stupid. I went at dawn, just as the first light cut the sky open like a blade. The place looked dead. No whispering, no figures, no bells. But when I reached the church ruins, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Footprints. 2 sets. Fresh. 1 human. 1 pawed. Taz. They led up to the well, the collapsed stones covered in a thin layer of frost. The prints ended at the edge, like something or someone had gone down into the dark. I knelt by the well, peered over the edge. It wasn't dry. Far below, water shimmered, and just beneath the surface, I saw it. A face. Not mine. Not Lena's. Just watching. Then it opened its mouth, and I heard the bell. I staggered back from the well, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to claw its way out of me. My boot slipped on the frost-slicked stone, and I landed hard, palms scraping across gravel, knees in the dust. But the sound, God, that sound! It didn't echo. It didn't ring through the ruins like a real bell would. It was inside me. Like something vibrating behind my eyes in the marrow of my bones. A tone that wasn't heard with the ears but remembered with the soul. I don't remember getting up. 1 second I was flat on my back staring up at the pale sky, and the next I was running, sprinting back across the town's brittle bones, lungs heaving, throat burning with the taste of copper and ash. My van waited at the edge like salvation, and I fumbled with the keys so hard I nearly snapped one off in the lock. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because the bell tone hadn't stopped. It had only changed. Now it was pulsing, like it was tracking me, measuring the distance between me and it. And underneath the sound was something worse. A presence. A pressure, like a mind unfolding beneath the earth, ancient and endless, curious and hungry. I turned the ignition, slammed the van into reverse, and nearly tore the transmission trying to escape that place. But as I skidded down the washboard trail and back onto the main road, something occurred to me. The face in the water. It wasn't trying to lure me. It was trying to warn me. I made it back to Phoenix by nightfall, parked behind a Walmart and collapsed in the back of the van, wrapped in every blanket I owned. The cold wasn't from the desert air. It was coming from inside me. I couldn't reach Lena. Her number was still disconnected. Her Instagram, silent. Her last post, a photo of Taz. But if you looked close, really close, you could see the reflection in the van's back window. It wasn't Lena holding the phone. It looked like her. But there was something wrong with the angle of the limbs, like a puppet bent the wrong way. Too many joints in too few places. I wanted to write it off as shadow, distortion, something innocent, but I couldn't. And then I remembered what Ray had said. You took something. I thought he meant the card, but he didn't. I took attention. I took memory. I went to a place meant to be forgotten, and I brought it back, and it was growing inside me now. The dreams started a week later. They weren't like normal dreams, not sequences, not stories, just rooms. One room, always the same, stone walls, a wooden beam across the ceiling, blackened with soot, a window that led nowhere, and a well in the center of the floor. No rope, no bucket, just the well. And every time I walked toward it, something called from below. Not in words, not even a voice, just the feeling of being recognized, the feeling of something remembering me. It got worse. I stopped dreaming the room and started waking in it. I'd fall asleep in my van and snap upright, heart racing, drenched in sweat, only to see stone around me, to feel cold air bleeding from that impossible well. Sometimes I could move, sometimes I couldn't, but always, I'd wake up just before I looked into it, until the night I didn't. That night, I saw what was inside. It wasn't a face, it was a mirror. But the reflection wasn't mine. It was a version of me that had never left the town, and it smiled. I started driving east. I didn't know where I was going, just away. I figured maybe if I crossed enough rivers, climbed enough elevation, changed enough terrain, I could outrun it. But the thing is, you don't run from something like this. You carry it. Every mile I drove, the air felt heavier. The sun stayed longer in the sky than it should. Clocks ran weird, music warped. I'd pass people on the highway and they'd turn to stare a second too long as if they'd seen me before. And the worst part, every now and then I'd find another card. Just one. Always the Queen of Spades. Folded in the windshield wiper. Slipped into the frame of my side mirror, once tucked inside my bag of coffee grounds. I never heard them arrive, never saw who left them, but they were always dry, always clean, like they'd never been touched by wind or weather. I started thinking maybe they were warnings, not threats, like the ghost town itself wasn't the danger. It was the memory of it. And maybe I wasn't the only one who remembered. Maybe the land was just a holding cell. And the real trap was survival. I made it to the Appalachian foothills before the voices started. They came at dusk, whispers in the trees, in the wind against the van's metal shell, low, repetitive, not English, not any language I recognized, but I understood the feeling. Grief, loss, a rage so deep it had turned cold. I recorded it once, left the recorder running while I tried to sleep, hoping to catch proof I wasn't losing my mind. I played it back the next morning. 37 minutes of silence, then a single sentence spoken in my own voice. Shh, you left her behind. That line hollowed me out. You left her behind. I'd never said those words. Not out loud, not even to myself, but I'd thought them. Late at night, in the quiet moments, I'd imagined what might have happened to Lena, what she saw when she went back, if she made it out, if she was still Lena when she did, and the worst part, I hadn't gone back for her. I'd gone back for me, to stop the dreams, to fix my fear, to quiet the thing gnawing on the edge of my sanity. I'd abandoned her, and now something new. I started writing her name on Post-it notes, on the dashboard, the ceiling, the inside of the fridge. I needed to keep her real in my mind, to fight the decay of memory that was happening faster every day, because things were slipping, like... One morning, I woke up in the van, except it wasn't the van. Same walls, same bed, but the frame was rusted, the windows were bolted, the floor was stone. It was the room again. Only this time I hadn't fallen asleep. The transition had happened in real time. I pounded the walls until my fists bled, screamed until my throat burned, but no sound came back. Just silence, and that impossible well in the center of the room, waiting. I thought I'd lost hours. When I finally blinked, just blinked, I was back in the van. The sun hadn't moved. I checked the dash cam. 3 seconds had passed. 3. I couldn't trust time anymore. I couldn't trust place. Somewhere in Georgia, I picked up a hitchhiker. Don't ask me why. I think I was losing it. Maybe I needed to talk to someone. Maybe I just wanted to prove someone else could see me, could touch the same world I was clinging to. He was maybe 20. Dusty. Carhartt jacket, no bag. Said his name was Eli. Didn't say much else. We rode in silence for a while. Then, without prompting, he asked, "You ever been west of Tucson?" My hands tightened on the wheel. I said no. He smiled. Not a cruel smile, not exactly, more like pity. I think you've been somewhere most people don't come back from. I stared at him. He didn't look surprised. Places like that, they don't forget, he said. They cling. You go digging in dead towns, don't be shocked if something comes up with you. I pulled over, told him to get out. He didn't argue, just stepped down and walked into the woods. But before he disappeared into the pines, he turned and said, "It's not about ghosts, it's about what remembers you." That night, I didn't sleep. I drove until dawn. The dashboard lights flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat, and the radio wouldn't stop ringing a single word in 100 voices. Remember. I hit the Atlantic coast 6 days later. Parked on a beach in North Carolina. Figured salt water was as far as I could go. I waded in up to my chest, clothes and all, trying to wash it off, whatever had followed me, whatever I'd brought back. But when I turned around, the beach wasn't there. The van wasn't there, only rock and dust and the outline of a bell tower in the haze. I was back, and this time there was no waking up. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. I wandered the ghost town again, barefoot, bleeding, half mad. I passed buildings I knew had collapsed, saw names etched into wooden beams I'd never noticed before. My name, but it wasn't mine, it was Lena's handwriting. There, scratched into the stone near the church foundation. He left. I stayed. She'd written it in blood. And under it, carved deeper, angrier, were the words, "I'm still here." Then came the last night, the final one I could stand. The sky cracked open, no thunder, no rain, just splintered light. Like the atmosphere itself was breaking apart, and in the center of town where the well had once been rose a figure. Not human. Not Lena. It was tall, thin, draped in shadow like skin, with limbs that stretched wrong like gravity didn't bind them. A hood of void where a face should be. But it wore her voice, and it spoke in mine. You remembered. My knees gave out. I couldn't speak, couldn't run. The air was too thick, like drowning in memory. You carried us, it said, and then it stepped forward until it stood directly over me. One long finger, bone white, pointed at my chest. No one leaves with memory, not without a price. It didn't touch me. It entered me, and I screamed. But there was no sound, only the bell. I woke up parked behind a diner in Tennessee. The sun was up. My hands were clean, no blood, no dust, no rusted tools or ancient maps. Just me. Just the van, just silence. Except the back seat was damp. Not from rain, from salt water, and resting in the cup holder, perfectly dry, was the Queen of Spades. I never found Lena again. I kept looking for months. Filed reports. Hired a PI. Nothing. But sometimes I think I hear her in the static between stations. A voice like wind in the trees, a chime like something old swinging on a frayed rope. And sometimes I dream of that town. Not ruined. Rebuilt. Alive. The people there walk with heads too still, smiles too wide. They don't blink. And every time I look down at my hands in the dream, they're not mine. They're hers. If you camp long enough in the desert, you'll feel it. Not the heat. Not the emptiness, but the weight of what came before. The stories buried in the dust don't stay buried. They just wait. For footsteps, for voices, for witnesses. For people like me. People like you. So if you ever pass through Arizona, if you ever find yourself near an unnamed fork off Highway 89, where the air tastes too still and the birds fall silent, don't stop. Don't take pictures. And whatever you do, don't look into the well. Not unless you're ready to see who you really left behind and what part of you stayed behind with them. Before we dive into the next exciting story, drop a comment below and let me know, what time is it where you're watching from? I'm curious to see where everyone's tuning in from around the world. I never used to believe in the idea of a place holding a memory. Not just a story or some passed down superstition, but a presence, a shape that lingers, a whisper, almost too faint to hear, but loud enough to turn your head when you're alone in the woods. I used to think fear came from outside, from something visible, a bear in the dark, a stranger at your door, a broken engine in the middle of nowhere, but I know better now. Fear grows inside you. It waits for the quiet, for the silence of the forest where your thoughts echo too loud. It takes root when you second guess yourself, when you hear something you know you shouldn't have heard. And that all started for me in the Appalachians 2 autumns ago. October. Just cold enough that you start to see your breath in the mornings, warm enough during the day to keep the firewood dry. I remember the exact sound of the leaves under my boots. Crisp, hollow, like the woods were thinning out for something else. It was supposed to be a solo trip. I needed it. I was coming off a rough breakup and trying to untangle all the noise that built up in my chest after 6 years of trying to make someone else happy. She hated the van, called it a rusted-out coffin on wheels. I loved it, still do. A 1987 Volkswagen Vanagon, moss green, a little busted on the edges, but it ran smooth if you knew how to coax it, like a friend who needed time to wake up in the morning. I left from Asheville, North Carolina, and aimed north. No itinerary, just followed the Blue Ridge Parkway and let the forest pull me wherever it wanted. Every night, I'd find some quiet patch off the road, flip the back seat into a bed, and let the stillness take me. I slept easy for the first few nights. Real sleep, too, not the kind you fake in an apartment with traffic and glowing screens. Just trees, wind, and the occasional coyote yipping in the distance. Then, around the fourth night, I stopped near a little place called Craggy Gardens. You might know it. Elevation's a bit higher there. The air's cooler, smells sweeter like wet stone and pine. There's a pull-off just past milepost 364. No signs, no picnic benches, just a narrow dirt track that drops off into the woods. I shouldn't have taken it. I don't say that because something bad happened right away. In fact, the first few hours were perfect. The spot opened up into this small grassy clearing with an old, overgrown fire ring, like someone had camped there decades ago and never came back. I parked the van just at the edge, facing east, so I could catch sunrise through the trees. There was a strange hush in the clearing, though, like the air was holding its breath. I chalked it up to the elevation, maybe the wind being blocked. But I remember noting it, how even the bugs seemed quieter here. That night I made a fire, heated some canned chili, wrote a few things in my journal. The moon was nearly full and cast a pale, grainy light over everything. You could see your own shadow at midnight. That's how still and clear it was. And then, right around 2 a.m., I heard it. A voice. Not a howl, not an animal. A human voice, low, soft, and close. Like it was speaking just beyond the firelight, not more than 20 feet from where I sat inside the van. It said my name, not shouted, not whispered, just spoken, firm, calm, Eli, just once. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. I didn't move for maybe 30 seconds, just stared out the window into the trees, trying to make out a shape, a shadow, anything. Nothing moved. I told myself it had to be my imagination. Maybe the wind caught something weird or I was dreaming. But I was awake, very awake. Still, I forced myself to breathe, locked the van doors from the inside, and lay down on the fold-out bed in the back. Didn't even bother pulling the curtains shut. I needed to be able to see outside. Around 3 a.m., it happened again. Same voice, same calm tone. Eli, but this time it was farther, like it had drifted out past the clearing, almost like it was leading me. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I packed up and got the hell out of there. No coffee, no fire, no breakfast. I didn't even brush my teeth. Just started the engine and rolled back onto the parkway. I told myself I must have imagined it, that I was overtired, that it was the wind or a bird or even a dream bleeding into the edges of wakefulness. But it kept bothering me, how clearly it had said my name. 2 syllables. No echo, just Ali. And I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not even my ex, no one. That should have been the end of it. One weird night in the woods. But it wasn't. Over the next few days, it kept happening. Different places, always in the middle of nowhere, always in the deepest part of the night. One voice. My name, sometimes it sounded male, sometimes female. Once, it sounded like my mother's voice, and she's been dead for 5 years. By the 7th night, I was back near the Tennessee border, past Roan Mountain. I stopped at a more popular campground that time. Figured being around other people might shake the feeling. But When I pulled into a spot and killed the engine, the old man in the site next to me leaned over the picnic table and just stared. Didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched me like he knew me. Later, when I was setting up for dinner, he walked over without saying anything, stood about 5 feet from me, chewing on a toothpick. I nodded politely and said, "Evening." He didn't respond. Then, in a gravel-thick drawl, he said, "They been calling you too?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He cocked his head, spit the toothpick out, and said it again. "The voices. They say your name at night, don't they?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't told a soul. Not a single person. I stared at him, trying to read his face. It was leathered with sun, wrinkles deep enough to lose a coin in. His eyes were cloudy, cataract blue, but serious. "Don't answer," he said. "Not once, not even if it sounds like your mama." I stood there with the spatula still in my hand, chili starting to burn in the pan behind me, but I couldn't look away from the old man. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stood rooted in place like the trees behind us. "What happens if you do?" I asked, finally finding my voice. He shook his head slowly, like someone who'd seen the answer and wished he hadn't. They know when you're weak, when your heart's cracked open. That's when they come whispering, trying to crawl in through that crack, make a home inside you. I half laughed, nervous. "You mean like spirits? Ghosts?" He gave me a dry smile, full of something darker than amusement. "I don't care what word you use. I just know folks around here don't go off alone in the mountains without protection. Not after what happened to the Baldwin girl." I was about to ask what he meant, but he turned and walked away without another word. Back to his little fire pit, back to his rusted-out truck camper that looked like it hadn't moved since Y2K. I didn't eat dinner that night. I just sat in the van with the door locked, windows cracked for air. I kept waiting to hear it again. And at 2:46 a.m., I did. Eerie. But this time, it wasn't outside. It came from the passenger seat. I whipped around, heart pounding so hard I thought it might rupture something. But the seat was empty. I fumbled for the flashlight, scanned every inch of the van. Nothing. Nothing out of place. No broken locks, no handprints on the windows, no signs of entry. But the air was ice cold, like something had just been there. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I walked over to the old man's site to talk. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe I just didn't want to feel insane. But his truck was gone. No tire marks, no ash in the fire pit, no coffee cup, no trash. Nothing, like he'd never been there. I started asking around, locals, shopkeepers, people in the gas station up near Elk Park. I figured maybe someone would know what he meant by the Baldwin girl. And they did. They all did. She was 15, Emily Baldwin, disappeared in the early 90s, went out hiking near Roan Mountain with her parents. They camped overnight. According to the search reports, the girl got up in the middle of the night, opened the tent, and walked out barefoot into the woods. Never came back. No sign of struggle, no animal tracks, no torn fabric or blood, just a girl-sized gap in the morning dew where her body should have been. People said she was sleepwalking. Others said she ran away. But her father was quoted saying something I can't shake even now. "She heard something," he told a local paper. I know she did. She sat up in her sleeping bag, looked straight through me and said, "Did someone just call me?" Then she walked out. Nobody ever found her body, only her shoes neatly placed under a pine tree 10 miles away. That story should have been enough to send me packing, back to city lights, back to people and sidewalks and sirens, but it did the opposite. I needed to know more, because that feeling, that pressure behind my rib cage, that gnawing cold in my spine, it wasn't fading, it was building. Like whatever had spoken my name was growing more confident, more certain I was listening. So I drove deeper, into the heart of the range. Some part of me thought maybe I could outrun it. Maybe if I got far enough off the map, it would lose interest. Instead, it got worse. Every night, the voice came earlier. Every night, it got closer. It stopped calling just my name. It started asking questions. "Eli, do you remember? Eli, why did you leave her? Eli, come outside." They weren't questions I wanted to answer. Some nights, the voice came from the trees. Others, from the roof of the van. Once, I swear to you, it came from inside the walls of the van itself, like the steel was whispering. I started noticing little things, too. Small things that felt off, like reality was tilting a few degrees. Food would spoil faster than it should. The fire would burn low, even with fresh wood. My GPS would reset at random, glitch out and stutter like it was trying to reroute me to somewhere off-grid. And the animals, what few there were, stopped making noise. No crickets, no owls, just silence. Absolute silence. One night I parked in a grove near Linville Gorge. Should have been busy, but I was the only one there. Moonless night, foggy, the kind of thick Appalachian fog that settles in and stays like an unwelcome guest. I was lying in bed, staring at the van's ceiling, trying not to blink too long, trying not to fall asleep, when something heavy stepped right beside the van. Not a twig snap, not a squirrel, a footstep, then another, then the soft drag of something across the side panel like fingertips trailing paint. I didn't breathe, didn't move. It circled the van twice, then stopped by the driver's side window. I heard it inhale, and then, right next to the glass, closer than ever, it said, "You left her in the dark." That one broke me, because it was true. I hadn't told anyone that story, not even my ex. But years ago, when I was 17, my sister and I went hiking in Cherokee National Forest. Got caught in a sudden storm. She twisted her ankle bad and begged me to wait while she rested under a rock ledge. I panicked, ran for help. Took me too long to find a ranger. By the time we got back, she was gone. They found her 3 miles downhill the next day, soaking wet and hypothermic. Alive, but something in her had changed. She didn't talk for weeks. When she did, she said she'd heard voices in the trees, ones that told her I had left her to die. She's never forgiven me, and now this thing knew that. It knew everything. After that night at Linville Gorge, something in me started to fracture. I wasn't sure what was more terrifying, the idea that something supernatural was following me, or the idea that maybe I was unraveling, that maybe the solitude, the guilt, the silence, maybe it was finally cracking through the surface I'd kept so carefully guarded all my life. But then something happened that shook me so deeply, I stopped trying to explain it away. It was 2 days later. I'd driven all day without stopping, pushing deeper into the mountains. No cell service. No marked campsites. I didn't even know what county I was in. Just gravel roads and endless switchbacks, climbing towards something that felt both ancient and wrong. I stopped near a hollow around dusk, a patch of land near a dry creek bed, surrounded on 3 sides by cliffs that blocked the wind. There was a tree in the middle of the clearing, dead but still standing, its bark split and bleached like bone. Something about it felt like a marker. I didn't want to camp there. Every instinct in me screamed no. But I was too tired to keep going. So I parked. I lit no fire that night. Just lay in the dark, listening, and around midnight the voice came back. But it wasn't just my name this time. It was hers. My sister's. Elena. It was the same voice, the exact voice I remembered from when we were kids. Soft, clear. And this time it was coming from outside, from behind the van. Then another voice joined it. My mother's. Then my father's. Then a chorus. Voices I hadn't heard in years. Some of them were dead, some still alive. Some I'd only heard once in passing, strangers from long ago. All calling out. Not screaming, not wailing, just calling like they knew I was listening. Like they were waiting. Elena, Eli, why did you leave? Why didn't you help? Come with us. I pulled the covers over my head like I was 5 years old again. My hands were shaking. My breath felt trapped in my lungs. I gripped the key in the ignition so tight it left a mark in my palm. But I didn't start the engine. I didn't move. Because a part of me, a very small, very dangerous part, wanted to answer. I wanted to open the door, just to see. And that's when I understood what the old man meant. They wait for the cracked ones, for the broken, for the people running not from something, but with something inside them already unraveling. And I was unraveling fast. I must have passed out eventually because I woke up at dawn in a cold sweat. The sun was cutting through the trees at a low angle, painting the van in gold. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it had all been a dream, until I opened the driver's side window. There were handprints on the glass. 5 of them. But they weren't smudges, they were burned in. Blackened outlines, as if someone had pressed something searing hot against the window. One was the size of a child's. I didn't even brush my teeth. I turned the key and peeled out of that hollow so fast I ripped the front bumper on a tree stump. Didn't care. I just needed out. I drove until the van was gasping, until the mountains flattened and the fog gave way to the edge of some no-name town, where the people looked like they didn't even want to ask why my face was pale and my hands were trembling. I parked behind a diner, head still ringing with the echoes of those voices. And that's when I saw the sign, tacked to a bulletin board next to the back door, curled and faded but still legible. It said, "If the mountains call your name, don't answer. They're not talking to you." Fraud, no phone number, no name. Just that one sentence, like a warning from someone who had made the same mistake I almost did. I sat there in the van for maybe 2 hours, staring at it, watching the wind lift the edges of the paper like it wanted to float away. But it never did. I didn't go back to the mountains after that. I drove west, through the Tennessee Valley, into Arkansas, through flatland and heat and places where the trees don't whisper your name at night. I stayed near other people, cities, lights, the sound of tires on pavement, but the mountains never really left me. Every now and then when I'm parked somewhere quiet, a rest stop, a back road outside Santa Fe, even once along the Oregon coast, I'll hear something. Not loud, not threatening, just soft. My name, spoken like a secret, and I don't respond. Not anymore. Because I understand now, the mountains, especially those old Appalachian ones, they remember. They hold the echoes of every voice that's ever called out and never gotten an answer. They don't forget the lonely, or the guilty, or the brokenhearted. They just wait. They whisper. And if you listen long enough, they learn the shape of your name, the weight of your memories, the exact pitch to mimic the people you've lost. And then they offer you a terrible kind of comfort, the kind that promises warmth in exchange for surrender, the kind that tells you, it's not your fault, you can rest now, just open the door. But you can't. You mustn't. No matter how tired you are, no matter how hollow you feel, because once you respond, once you speak back, you're already gone. It's been months since I left those mountains. I've driven through deserts, over flatlands, through windstorms and long stretches of silence that test a man's ability to stay tethered to reality. But nothing has come close to what I felt in Appalachia. And yet something followed me. Not in a way you can see, not in the way movies tell it, but it lingers. It's in the way shadows fall too long behind the van some nights. How the air outside hums with a low frequency when I shut the engine off. How I wake up from dreams I can't remember, heart hammering, soaked in sweat, hands clenched like I've been gripping something that's no longer there. I started hearing from others too, people I met in dusty campgrounds out west, solo travelers, couples, people living full-time in their rigs. They'd recognize the look in my eye before I even told the story. One guy, Chris, maybe late 30s, pulled up next to me in an old Eurovan near Monument Valley. We sat around a fire drinking cheap coffee, swapping roots and tips. I mentioned, just in passing, I came from the Blue Ridge, camp near Roan. He went silent, eyes darkened. "You ever hear them?" he asked. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. He just nodded. "I did," he said quietly, "back in '09. Thought it was the wind at first, or people down the ridge, but it kept saying my brother's name. He died 2 years before. Hit and run. Never solved." I looked at him. His hands were shaking. He reached into the van, pulled out a tape recorder, old school, mini cassettes. I kept this running most nights just to prove to myself I wasn't crazy. He pressed play. It was scratchy at first, just wind, maybe an owl. Then it came through. A voice, distant and thin but unmistakable. "Daniel, come on, man. You left your hat." I stopped breathing, the tone, the rhythm. It sounded so normal, so casual, like someone calling out to their friend on a sunny afternoon. not whispering from the void of the Appalachian dark. Chris didn't say anything else. He just rewound the tape, clicked it shut, and tucked it back into a box like it was radioactive. And I realized I wasn't the only one. There were others. Others who'd gone up those roads with good intentions and too much weight in their chests. People who carried old wounds into places that feel somehow aware of them. Because that's what I think now. I think those mountains are more than just ancient. I think they know us. They've watched generations pass through, settlers, soldiers, runaways, outcasts, people seeking freedom or forgiveness or escape. And the land, it listens. It doesn't judge, but it also doesn't forget. I started keeping a journal, writing things down, even when they didn't make sense. Times, temperatures, GPS coordinates, dreams, smells, sounds, anything that felt off. I even drew the prints I saw that morning, the ones burned into the van glass. I compared them against my own hand, child-sized gloves, animal paws. Nothing matched. And the strangest part? They've faded. Completely, like the glass healed itself. I tried to tell my sister once. I called her from a library in Arizona to use the landline just to feel grounded. She answered, hesitant, distant. She still doesn't talk to me much. I've been thinking about what happened, I said, that night in Cherokee. A long silence. Then, I still hear it sometimes. What do you mean? The voice, she said, her tone dropping. The one that called to me, it never really stopped. That shook me more than anything I'd experienced, because I'd always assumed she'd moved on, that her silence was stubbornness, that she didn't want to remember. But she had. And now I think maybe that's how it works. Maybe once you've heard it, it leaves a mark, not physical, not even spiritual, just attentional, like it knows you're open now, like it's waiting. I've had to change how I camp. No more deep woods solitude, no more high ridges with panoramic views. I stay low now, public spaces, rest stops with sodium lights that buzz all night, and even then sometimes I still hear my name on the wind, Eli. Soft, sweet, kind. It never sounds angry, it just sounds familiar. That's the trick. That's what I want people to understand. This isn't the kind of horror that jumps out at you with claws and red eyes. It's not a beast. It's not a ghost with chains. It's subtle, patient. It waits for you to be vulnerable, to let your guard down, to need comfort so badly that you do anything to feel known again. And it offers that with a voice you recognize, with warmth even. A memory you thought was gone, a phrase only your grandmother ever used, a nickname from a childhood friend you haven't spoken to in 20 years. And then it asks, aren't you tired? Wouldn't it be easier to just let go? That's when you have to fight, because by then, it's already inside. And if you answer, if you speak back, it knows. I've read stories since then, old mountain tales, folklore, Cherokee legends, the Yunwitsunsdi, the Little People, the Cold Ones, the Stonewalkers. Every region has a name. Every family has a story they don't share unless the fire is low and the whiskey is strong. It's always the same pattern. Voices in the dark, missing time, vanished people, strangers who aren't quite right, a pull you can't explain, a longing that feels like nostalgia but isn't. There's power in the land. We don't respect it the way we should. Some people call it cursed, some sacred. I think it's both. And I think that if you carry grief into those woods, it will find you and offer to take it from you, but it never gives anything for free. Some nights, I wonder what would have happened if I had responded. If I'd stepped outside the van into the misty hollow where the voices called. If I'd said hello, or worse, if I'd said yes. Would I have disappeared? Would someone have found my van weeks later? Engine cold, keys still in the ignition, maps scattered like a wind had passed through? Would I have ended up on a missing persons flyer tacked to a ranger station corkboard, my face one of dozens staring blankly back at hikers filling their water bottles? I think about that sometimes. In motel rooms, in desert pull-offs, on long stretches of blacktop where nothing moves except the shadows of clouds across cracked earth. Because I wasn't brave that night, I was just lucky. I didn't stay because I trusted my instincts. I stayed because I was paralyzed, because my fingers wouldn't move, because fear locked my body down. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes survival is just not acting when every part of you is screaming to. There's a campsite out near Arkansas I return to sometimes. It's flat, wide, and bordered by a creek. I can see the tree line from a distance, and the stars open up above like a cathedral. No fog, no shadows, no voices. It's the only place I've ever felt peace since leaving the Blue Ridge. There's a local woman who runs the general store nearby, June. Gray hair, kind eyes, and the type of voice that always sounds like it's smiling. I started chatting with her on my second visit. Told her I was just passing through, needed rest, needed quiet. She looked at me with this knowing expression. "You've been in the hollers," she said, not asking. I didn't deny it. She nodded, walked around the counter, and handed me something without saying a word. It was a pouch, hand-stitched, filled with herbs and what smelled like cedar shavings, tied off with red thread. "For the voices," she said. I blinked. "What do you mean?" June didn't elaborate, just said, "You don't owe them anything. That's the lie they tell you, that you're guilty, that you've done something that needs paying." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because how could this woman, this stranger, speak so precisely to the heart of what I'd been carrying? The guilt. That's what those mountains feed on, not blood, not fear. Guilt. They wait for people who can't forgive themselves, who carry unanswered questions, broken promises, unfinished goodbyes. That's what they use. They echo it back to you in the voices you miss most, and when they finally get close, when they surround the van or your tent or your fire, they don't scream. They comfort. They sound like your mother, your child, your best friend, and they always say the same thing. It's not your fault. But you can't believe them, because that's not your mother. That's not your child. That's not your friend. It's the land, echoing them, reshaping them like smoke in the wind. And if you let it in, if you let the guilt open the door, then you're gone. I've never used the pouch June gave me. It sits on the dash right above the stereo, faded now from the sun, but I keep it there as a reminder that I'm not crazy, that others know, that what I experienced is real, and more than that, it's been happening for generations. I've thought about going back, driving east again, returning to that hollow with a camera, a recorder, trying to document it, prove to people what's out there. Maybe it's selfish, maybe it's reckless, but there's a part of me, and I hate this, that still wants to hear the voice again, because it knew me, it knew everything. It whispered things no one else could possibly know. Secrets I hadn't spoken aloud since childhood. Regrets I thought I'd buried. It used them like tools, not to attack me, but to draw me closer, to wear me down. There's a kind of seduction in that, a promise that you'll be seen, that you'll be forgiven, that you can rest. But I know better now. I've read enough journals, talked to enough others, seen enough vanishings on forums, maps, red strings stretching across the eastern seaboard like veins pulsing with sorrow. It always starts the same way. You go out there looking for something. Peace, clarity, freedom. You find silence. And in that silence, something begins to whisper. If you're lucky, you leave. If you're not, your story ends with your name on a rock, or a voicemail no one ever checks, or a van parked under a dead tree with the keys still in the ignition. But not me. Not this time. Because I've learned how to listen without answering. To hear the voices, but not follow them. To sit with my guilt and own it, not hand it over to some invisible force wearing the skin of my memories. That's the real danger. Not the voice itself, but the desire to believe it. I keep driving. I keep watching. And if I ever hear that voice again, if the night grows still and the trees start to press close and I hear Eli on the wind, I'll do what I've done every night since that hollow. I'll stay silent. I'll hold my breath, and I'll wait for morning. I think part of me still wants to understand it. Not to conquer it, not to defeat it. That's not the kind of thing you can fight with steel or fire, but maybe to name it, to face it. Because the worst kind of fear is the one you keep pushing down, pretending it wasn't real, telling yourself it was just stress, exhaustion, imagination. I lived in that state for too long. Denial is a warm blanket when you're shivering in the unknown, but it'll smother you if you hold it too tight, and I did. For weeks after I left the mountains, I told myself it had been a kind of dream, a breakdown. I even looked up dissociative episodes, sleep paralysis, hypnagogia, all the explanations the mind can offer to protect itself. I wanted science to explain the voice that knew my name. The frost that crept across the inside of my windshield despite a summer heat wave. The prints that didn't belong to anything human or animal, but it didn't fit. None of it fit. And the more I tried to make it fit, the more detached I felt. Like I wasn't part of the world anymore, just floating above it, going through the motions. Until something small snapped me back. It was in New Mexico, outside a town called Truth or Consequences. I was parked at a rest stop near a dry lake bed. Clear night, no clouds, stars visible from horizon to horizon. I stepped out to brush my teeth under the open sky. Just the usual rhythm. Spit, rinse, wipe my face on my sleeve, and then I heard it. A low click behind me. Soft, rhythmic, not mechanical, not animal. Click, 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 like someone tapping a stone against a tree trunk. Deliberate, measured. I turned slowly. Nothing there. Just the still dark and the brush line beyond the gravel. But the clicking continued. Closer now. And then the voice. Not my name this time, just one word, spoken in a low, sing-song whisper. Forgive. I stood there with foam on my lips, toothbrush in hand, heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to claw its way out. I didn't respond, didn't move. But I felt it. That same pressure I'd known back in North Carolina, the sense that the world had turned inside out, that I was no longer alone and never really had been. I didn't sleep that night, didn't go back in the van. I sat in the driver's seat, doors locked, headlights on, engine running. I waited until the sun broke the horizon and the clicking stopped. And I realized something important then. It doesn't stay in the mountains. Whatever it is, whatever force was in that hollow, it can follow, not like a shadow or a hitchhiker, but like a wound that hasn't closed. Like a thread that's still attached, trailing behind you, invisible and thin, but real. It's in me now, or I'm in it. I've talked to others since then. Quiet conversations on CB radios, whispered admissions passed between travelers at remote campsites. Some of them have heard the clicking too. Others report knocks. 3 at a time, always at 3:33 a.m., always from the side of the vehicle facing the woods. One woman, she traveled in a Westphalia like mine, told me she saw her own reflection wave at her when she wasn't moving from inside the van. Her own face, smiling. She hasn't been the same since, neither have I. But the deeper I go, the more I realize the real danger isn't in the wilderness. It's in the temptation to give in. To follow the whisper, to believe the lie that you're being offered peace when really you're just being emptied. Because these things, whatever they are, they don't want your life. They want your will. They want you to stop choosing, to drift, to surrender, to become like them, echoing voices without direction, pain without purpose, names without faces. And if you do, I think you don't die. Not in the traditional sense, you just fade. Like fog at sunrise. I'm writing this now from the edge of a lake in Colorado. It's cold tonight, the kind of cold that settles deep in your joints and makes you rethink how far you've come. There's no wind, no animals, not even insects. But there is a sound, low, barely audible, like breathing. Not mine, something exhaling slowly just outside the van. I don't get out, I've learned better. Instead, I press my pen harder to this page and remind myself, I exist. I'm real. My choices are mine. I whisper it to myself like a prayer. I am still here. Because I am. I've felt the pull of those dark places, and I'm still driving, still resisting, still making coffee in the morning and checking tire pressure and turning the music up loud when the road gets lonely. I still wave at other VW drivers when they pass, hand lifted from the wheel in solidarity. They don't know what I've seen. But maybe some of them have felt it too. Maybe you have. And if you have, if you're reading this, or listening to my voice as you stare out at a dimly lit campground somewhere in Appalachia or Oregon or Utah, I want you to know you are not alone, and you are not broken for hearing what you heard. But for the love of everything you are, don't answer, no matter how sweet the voice, no matter how badly you want to believe it's someone you lost. It isn't. And if you respond, if you speak back, that's when they know they can come in. Some people say the scariest thing is not knowing what's out there, but they're wrong. The scariest thing is knowing exactly what's out there and realizing it knows you, knows your name, knows your grief, knows the exact pitch of the voice you long to hear and the precise moment to whisper it in the dark. I didn't understand that at first. I thought I'd been chosen at random. Wrong place, wrong time. A solo camper caught in some backwoods coincidence. But the truth sank in slowly over months like fog creeping down a slope. This thing had waited for me. It knew I was coming. And not just me. All of us who wander into the woods with the weight of something unresolved. Campers, hikers, solo van lifers like me. We're all out here running from something, aren't we? A death, a breakup, a failure we never quite healed from. We say we're looking for freedom, simplicity, peace. But a lot of us are just trying to outrun the things that haunt us in silence, the hollow places inside us. And that's what these voices feed on. They're not monsters in the classic sense. No claws, no glowing eyes. They're echoes, shadows that borrow your memories, mimics that call to the exact place where your armor is thin. I still remember the second night I heard it. After the Blue Ridge, after the lake bed, after weeks of silence that lulled me into a false sense of safety. I was parked in a canyon in Arizona, red walls, clear skies, no fog, no trees. I felt invincible again. I cooked dinner over a propane stove, leaned back in a camp chair, let the night wrap around me like a blanket, and just when I let myself believe it was over, I heard her voice. My sister. She died 5 years ago. Car accident. I was supposed to drive her home that night. I canceled last minute, too tired, needed space. We hadn't spoken in weeks before that. And suddenly, in that canyon where I thought I was alone, I heard her. Soft, fragile. Eli. It was the way she used to say my name when we were kids, drawn out, full of wonder. Not an accusation, just recognition. Eli, where are you? I dropped my coffee. The tin cup clattered on the rock beside me. I stood up too fast, tripped over the camp chair, hit the dirt hard, and the voice came again. Don't leave me alone again. My throat tightened. I turned in a full circle. The canyon echoed back the last syllables. Again, again, again. I knew it wasn't her. I knew. But something deep inside me cracked open anyway. Because even knowing what it was, knowing how it worked, didn't make the ache in my chest go away. That's the worst part. You can know it's a trick, but it still feels like truth. It still hits the place where you haven't forgiven yourself. I didn't respond that time either, but I almost did. My lips parted. My voice caught in my throat, and I swear to you, I felt something move closer when I did, like responding would have given it form, shape, access. I spent the rest of the night inside the van, every window covered, every door locked, the engine idling until dawn just in case I needed to flee. It didn't call again that night, but something scraped against the side of the van around 3 a.m., long, slow, like fingers. I didn't look. I just clenched my jaw and whispered to myself, "You are not welcome. You cannot come in." I must have said it 100 times before I fell asleep. It's a mantra now, a shield. And maybe that's all we have out here. Not weapons, not answers, but convictions. Boundaries we draw in the dirt with trembling hands. Not because we're strong, but because we have no choice. I know what I am now. I'm a carrier, like someone who's walked through nuclear ash. I've picked up trace elements of something ancient, poisonous, and unseen. But maybe that also makes me a kind of warning, a flare on the horizon for others out there like me. Because this thing, this presence in the woods, in the canyons, in the empty pull-offs across America, it's not just haunting places anymore. It's haunting people. People like us, the ones who camp alone, the ones who keep driving, the ones who don't call home enough and don't have anyone who knows exactly where they are at any given moment. We are easy prey, but we don't have to be victims. We don't have to answer. We can listen. We can acknowledge the voice without letting it in. We can choose to live. That's what I remind myself of every morning when I turn the ignition and the van hums to life. Every time I pass an empty site with ashes in the fire pit and no tire tracks in the dirt. Every time I see a face in a rearview mirror that looks like someone I loved, but isn't. I keep moving. I keep resisting because someone out there needs to hear this. You're not alone. But if the whisper comes, don't answer it. I've spent nearly a year on the road since that first night in the Hollow. A year of foggy mountain passes, flooded dirt trails, and campsites where silence has weight, where silence isn't peaceful, it's predatory. And somewhere along the way, I stopped looking for comfort in the usual places. The warmth of a fire, the sound of another engine nearby, the glow of a ranger station light far down the ridge. Because I started to understand that the thing I'd brought back with me, or maybe the thing I'd awakened, didn't care about fire or distance or walls. It didn't knock anymore. It didn't need to. It had learned the shape of my mind. It had studied the architecture of my grief. And some nights, when the temperature drops for no reason and the air smells like wet pine even in the desert, I can feel it slipping between the cracks in my thoughts. Testing. Waiting. But here's the part I didn't expect. I'm no longer afraid of it in the same way. Oh, don't get me wrong. The dread is still there. That crawling feeling across your scalp when you know something's watching you just beyond your line of sight. That low panic when a familiar voice says your name in a way that makes your stomach drop. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm afraid of what it makes me want. Because there are moments, especially on those nights when the loneliness feels unbearable, when I can't remember the last time someone said my name without sorrow in it, that the whisper feels almost kind, almost warm, like an invitation to rest, to stop wandering, to step into the fog and finally let go of everything I've been carrying. That's the danger, not the voice, but the part of me that wants to believe it. That's what no one tells you about long-term solo camping. About the road, about living out of your Volkswagen and going where the signal dies and the trail gets narrow and the air gets thin. You don't just face the wilderness, you face yourself. The version of you that can't hide behind a job or a relationship or a morning routine. The version of you that stares back in the side mirror after 3 days without speaking to another soul. And if you've got even a hairline fracture in your soul, the whisper will find it. It'll settle in, grow roots, try to become the voice you trust most. That's what it is. That's the trap. And that's why I keep driving, why I journal every night before bed, no matter how tired I am, why I talk out loud even when there's no one around to hear it, to remind myself that my voice matters more than the one whispering in the dark. I park in well-lit places now, near towns, not always, but often enough. I stay in touch with other travelers, the few who've experienced something similar and still have the strength to resist it. We don't call it a creature, we don't give it a name, because names give things power. Instead, we refer to it the way old locals used to, as the hollowing. Not because of where it lives, but because of what it does. It hollows you out. It makes you doubt your memories, your instincts, your worth. It strips away everything that makes you you, until all that's left is a soft echo that repeats whatever it's told. That's what happened to Caleb. I didn't mention him before because I didn't want to believe it, but I think now you need to know. Caleb was another solo traveler I met outside Roanoke, drove a 91 Vanagon, mellow guy, deep laugh. Carried an old acoustic guitar in his rig even though he only knew 3 chords. We crossed paths a few times, shared campfires, traded stories, swapped maps. Then one day, he vanished. I found his van parked off an old forest road near Tellico Plains. Engine cold, gear inside, keys still in the ignition, no sign of struggle, no footprints. But his journal was open on the dash, and the last line stopped me cold. It just said, "She says if I answer, I'll see her again." That's all. No signature, no date, just those words. He'd answered. I know he had. And now when I park at night and the crickets fall silent all at once and the air shifts and my breath fogs inside the van, even in July, I sometimes hear her voice too. The same voice Caleb wrote about. She tells me she can fix the ache, bring peace, let me rest, and for a moment, just one moment, I want to believe her. But then I remember what I saw in Caleb's eyes the last time we spoke. That flicker of something missing, like his soul was already being siphoned away. And I grit my teeth and whisper my own name like a lifeline, because that's the only way out, to remember who you are, to keep your name on your own lips, not theirs. I've made it this far, and maybe that's the point, not to be fearless, but to be faithful to yourself, to the road, to the life you're building, even if it sometimes trembles under the weight of solitude. So if you're out there right now, if you're watching the moon rise above the trees and feeling something shift in the wind, if the voice comes, soft, sweet, familiar, don't answer it. Grip the wheel, light the fire, call your name out loud, and know this: you are not alone. You are still you. And as long as you keep choosing that truth, they can't come in. There are places in this country where the silence carries weight, where the trees grow too still and the snow falls like a veil over something ancient. Michigan in winter is not just cold, it's quiet in a way that unsettles the soul. I never used to believe in that sort of thing. Not really. Superstitions were something I left behind when I bought my Volkswagen Westphalia and hit the road full time. I was 33, burned out from years working IT in Detroit, and ready to trade cubicles for coastlines, conference calls for forests. I wasn't running from anything. I told myself that for a long time. But sometimes we don't know what we're escaping until we drive headfirst into it. I had made it a rule to chase warmth. Arizona, Southern California, the Gulf Coast. Those were my winter routes. But last December, something pulled me north. I'd gotten an email from a guy named Colin, a fellow camper I met once during a foggy night in Maine. We'd swapped beers and stories in Acadia, and I hadn't heard from him since until he wrote me this message. You ever try the UP in winter? There's a spot near Marquette. It's wild, beautiful, isolated. No people. You'd like it. That was it. No coordinates, no follow-up, just a suggestion. And for reasons I still don't understand, I took it. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan is a different world in winter. Thick forest, buried cabins, back roads that go nowhere. It's all snow and pine and sky. That first day I drove in, late afternoon sun breaking through the clouds, I remember thinking, this is exactly what I needed. Peace. Solitude, the kind of stillness that can only be found where no one's around to disturb it. I parked my VW in a clearing just off a service trail, the snow only about 6 inches deep then. There were tracks from a snowmobile that had passed days before, but nothing fresh. No cell signal, but that was expected. I had firewood, propane, a stocked fridge, everything I needed to ride out a few nights. I was alone, and I was okay with that. The first night was calm. The second was not. It started with the cold, not the usual kind. This was different. A creeping, unnatural cold that seemed to seep in from every crack in the van, despite the insulation. I woke up around 2 a.m., shivering violently, my sleeping bag soaked with sweat, even though my breath came out in clouds. The propane heater was still running, but it felt like the warmth had been sucked out of the air. And then came the sound. It wasn't loud. Not at first. Just a faint crunching outside the van, like something walking in the snow. I froze, listening, trying to rationalize. A deer, a fox, maybe a moose. But then the steps stopped, right by the sliding door. I didn't move, I barely breathed. My heart hammered so loud I thought whatever was out there could hear it. And then a single dragging sound, like claws over metal. One long scrape across the van's side from front to back. Deliberate. I reached for my flashlight, but didn't turn it on. I didn't want to give away my position. The windows were all iced over from the inside. I couldn't see out. For what felt like an eternity, I just sat there, gripping the handle of that flashlight like it was a weapon, waiting for the next sound. But nothing came. Not footsteps walking away, not another scrape. Just silence. Eventually, I convinced myself it had to be ice falling from a branch, maybe sliding down the van. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that, because if I didn't, I'd start thinking about the stories, the old ones, the kind you hear whispered in bars and around fires up north. Stories about something that watches from the woods, something that walks like a man but isn't, something that feeds on fear. I slept with the light on the rest of the night, but it wasn't sleep, really. More like drifting in and out of half-conscious panic. Every time the wind picked up, I flinched. Every branch creak felt too close, too purposeful. When morning came, I stepped outside. The cold bit hard, but the sky was clear. I walked around the van, inspecting, and there, on the passenger side, was a long scratch in the frost. Not deep, but unmistakable. Not natural. There were no animal tracks. Nothing disturbed the snow except mine. I told myself I'd leave, that I'd pack up and head south again, back to where the sun felt real and the woods didn't stare back. But something stopped me. Maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe curiosity. But I stayed. That third night, it got worse. The temperature dropped again. I'd never felt air that cold, like it burned when you breathed it in. The kind of cold that doesn't just touch your skin, it sinks into your bones, into your thoughts, dulling everything. And with it came a strange heaviness, a pressure, like the forest around me had closed in. I spent the early evening chopping more wood from a nearby fallen birch, trying to keep my body moving, but every few minutes I'd stop, because I kept getting the feeling I wasn't alone. Not that I could hear anything specific. It was quieter than it should have been. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, no distant rustle of deer through the brush. Just me, just my breath. And the trees. They started to feel wrong, like they were leaning a little more than before. Like the deeper I looked into them, the more it felt like something was hiding behind them, waiting for me to blink. I lit a fire early that night, larger than usual, right outside the van. I figured I'd sit near it for a bit before turning in, reassure myself, just fire and stars. But I couldn't relax. I kept scanning the tree line. Every time the flames cracked and shifted, shadows would leap out and dance, but in the gaps between those shadows, I kept seeing something. Not clearly, just the impression of movement, a silhouette, tall and thin, maybe 50 feet away. But when I focused, it was gone. After the third time it happened, I shouted, loud, sudden, "Hey!" It was stupid. I didn't even know what I expected. Echoes bounced off the trees, and then silence. Again. But then I heard a voice, very faint, almost inaudible. From somewhere just beyond the firelight, it said my name, whispered it. Once. Evan. I stood frozen. My back tensed so hard I thought my spine might snap. My name, in the snow, in the dark. I hadn't told anyone where I was, not even Colin. There was no one else for miles. I backed slowly toward the van, grabbing a burning piece of firewood as I went. Not rational, just instinct. I don't even remember getting inside, slamming the sliding door shut, locking it. I just remember kneeling in the center of the van, clutching that half-burned log like it was a sword. Then came the second voice, a whisper again, but closer. Too close. This time it wasn't outside. It was behind the van. So hungry. I snapped around. The back windows were fogged over, completely opaque, but something heavy brushed against the back of the van. A dragging noise. A slow push, like weight shifting from one side to the other. I didn't yell this time. I didn't move. I just listened. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. And then, I swear to you, something knocked. Just once. A single, deliberate knock. Right on the back window. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the keys, threw the burning log into the snow outside, and started the engine. I didn't even care where I was driving. I just knew I needed to go. The tires spun for a moment, but caught. Snow sprayed out from behind the van as I backed out fast and turned toward the service road. The headlights cut through the trees, but all I could think about was what might be running just out of their reach, what might be keeping pace in the dark, just behind me, watching. After maybe 20 minutes of driving, I saw a clearing that looked somewhat familiar. It led to an abandoned ranger station I'd passed on the way, and it's where I stopped. The place was barely a building anymore, just a frame and some rotting timbers under the snow. But I couldn't keep driving all night. I had to breathe, to think. The heater in the van was struggling, and the inside of my windshield was frosting up. I scraped it with my glove and stared out at the trees. And then I saw it, standing still, maybe 40 feet away, too tall to be a man, gaunt, almost skeletal, skin like stretched bark or decayed flesh, eyes too far apart, sunken, glowing faintly, arms dangling long past the knees. It wasn't moving, just watching me. And worst of all, I realized I wasn't afraid. Not yet. I should have been. But in that moment, something inside me went quiet, like my brain was slowing down, folding in on itself. I felt hollow, like I was forgetting why I was even out here, like nothing mattered, like I was already lost. It started walking, slowly, one step at a time. I don't know what broke the spell. Maybe the way its joints bent wrong, or the sound of snow hissing under its feet. But something inside me screamed, "Move." I threw the van into reverse, slammed on the gas, nearly jackknifed on the icy road. The thing didn't run. It didn't have to, because it knew I'd be back, or maybe it knew I'd never really left. I drove south. I didn't stop until dawn, didn't eat, didn't drink, just drove, headlights chasing shadows until they were swallowed by morning. I made it to a gas station outside Iron Mountain. The clerk looked at me like I was a ghost. My eyes were sunken, lips cracked from the dry heat. I asked if there were any trails up by Marquette that had legends tied to them. Old native stories, local hauntings. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he handed me a beat-up pamphlet from under the counter. It looked homemade. Inside, a single word, Wendigo. The word hit me like a slap. I'd heard it before. Just fragments, passing references in late-night podcasts or horror blogs. But reading it there, on a printed pamphlet in a northern Michigan gas station, felt different, like it wasn't a story anymore, like I had been seen. I took the pamphlet to the van and read every word, parked under that gray morning sky, surrounded by frost and road salt. The details were worse than I remembered. The Wendigo wasn't just a monster, it was an idea, a spirit of hunger and winter born from desperation. It didn't just eat flesh, it consumed identity. It made you forget who you were until you weren't you anymore. According to Ojibwe legend, the Wendigo was once a man, always a man at first, lost in the cold, alone, hungry. And when he finally gave in, when he crossed that line, it took hold. It made a home inside him, twisted him, and he never felt full again. But it didn't end there. The Wendigo didn't just exist in the wilderness. It used the wilderness. It stalked the broken and the wandering. It didn't just kill. It corrupted. It watched, whispered, waited. It thrived on fear. And that's when I started to realize what had happened to me. The first night, the unnatural cold. The second, the whisper of my name. The third, it was trying to break me, to hollow me out, to invite it in. Because that's the rule with Wendigos. You don't just get attacked. You become. I threw the pamphlet down and stared at my own reflection in the glass. I didn't look like myself. My face was pale, drawn. My eyes were sunken deeper than just a sleepless night should have allowed. I had dark rings like bruises blooming under the skin. My lips were cracked, and there was dried blood in the corner of my mouth. I must have bitten it in my sleep, but I couldn't remember sleeping. And that's what terrified me. Because if this thing could get in, even a little, what else could it change? Far, south, desert, sun. Anything that wasn't snow, forest, cold. But a part of me already knew it wasn't going to be that easy. I drove for hours, past Escanaba, past Green Bay, but no matter how far I went, something followed. Not physically. I never saw it again after the ranger station, but I felt it, like a presence just behind my breath, like a weight on my chest I couldn't shake. The air stayed cold, colder than it should have been for where I was. My dreams were worse. Vivid, suffocating things. In one, I was wandering a snowy field. No sound, just wind. I found a figure kneeling near a tree. It was me, or at least it looked like me, but the face was stretched thin and sharp. Its skin was gray, too tight around the bones. It looked up, and it smiled. When I woke up, the van was freezing. I was drenched in sweat again. The heater was off, the propane tank empty, even though I had filled it just 2 days before. I checked the storage cabinet. Every single one of my backup canisters was gone. I had locked that cabinet. I remembered locking it. I always did. And then I noticed something worse. Scratches on the inside of the van, on the metal above the sliding door. Thin. Jagged. 4 of them. Like claws. I left the next morning without brushing my teeth, without making coffee, without even checking the oil. I didn't care. I just drove, following the highway until the snow started to thin and the light got warmer. I made it to southern Illinois before the weather finally felt right again, but it wasn't over because the fear never left. Even now, telling this story, I can feel the air tighten behind my ears. I can smell the pine sap and cold iron. I can hear that single knock on the glass clear as ever. I avoided winter after that. For 2 years, I refused to go north after October. Slept in deserts, parked in beach towns. I told myself I was done with the forest. But fear doesn't live in trees. It lives in your head. And if you carry it long enough, it becomes part of you. Colin never emailed again. I tried reaching out, but his address bounced. No response. I looked him up. His name came up in a missing person report from 2 winters ago. Last seen near Marquette. The same spot he told me to camp. I stared at that report for hours. His photo. His age. 32. Same age I was when I started my trip. The police said it was probably exposure. Another hiker caught in a sudden storm. But I knew better. I knew because I remembered something he told me back in Maine when we were drinking around that tiny campfire on a foggy night. He said there's places in America that pull at something inside you. Not curiosity. Not wonder. Something darker. Like a part of you wants to be lost. I didn't understand it then. I do now. The Wendigo doesn't hunt you like an animal. It doesn't chase you down and tear you apart. That's too loud. Too fast. It waits. It makes you give yourself up. I tried to live normally after that. Tried to be the kind of guy who laughed at his own paranoia. The kind who could sit at a bar in Arizona and tell the story like it was some spooky campfire tale, like it hadn't ripped something out of him. I joked about it, called it Michigan's best kept secret, said things like, you know you've been camping too long when the trees start calling your name. But the truth is, I wasn't okay. Not even close. I kept moving south, chasing warmth. Texas, New Mexico, Baja. I stayed near people, packed campgrounds, cheap motels, highway rest stops. I told myself the sunlight was healing me, but some part of me never thawed out. I'd wake up drenched in sweat even in 90-degree weather. I'd hear footsteps when there were none. I'd check the van door 10 times a night to make sure it was locked. And then one night outside El Paso, it came back. Knock. Not the creature. The feeling. It was just after midnight. The desert was quiet, moon hanging low and sharp like it had been cut from ice. I was journaling in the van, trying to write it all down for the first time. Not to post, not to share, just to get it out. And then, in the middle of a sentence, I stopped. I'd written a word I didn't recognize. Not a misspelling, not a mistake. It just wasn't mine. Hungry. I didn't even remember writing it. It was there between lines about Colin and the ranger station. The ink was darker, heavier, like I'd pressed too hard. The pen still in my hand. I dropped the journal, slammed it shut. That night I dreamed of snow again. Only this time I wasn't running. I was standing in the middle of a frozen lake. No wind, no sound, and beneath the ice, something shifted. A shadow moving in slow circles under my feet. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then I looked down, and my reflection didn't match me. It was taller, hollow-cheeked, eyes sunken and burning gold, smiling. I woke up screaming. I knew I couldn't outrun this thing, not with highways, not with heat. It wasn't about the forest anymore. It was about me. Something inside me was still open, still cracked, and if I didn't close it, it was going to take the rest. So I made a choice. I turned the van around, drove north again, back toward the Upper Peninsula. I told myself it wasn't revenge, it wasn't pride, it was survival. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep floating from campground to campground, wondering if the thing in the trees had followed me in or if I'd brought it myself. I had to face it. I packed light, just essentials, firewood, tools, one backup battery, a voice recorder, and a notebook. Not the one I had written hungry. In. That one I burned in Texas. I found the same trail from 2 years before. Plowed and open, though no one else seemed to be using it. There were no fresh tire tracks, no boot prints. Just me and the Volkswagen climbing through the frost like ghosts, returning to the scene of a murder. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, the trees less looming, the path more familiar, but the feeling was the same. The quiet, that unnatural stillness that blanketed everything like ash. I made camp near the old ranger station again, what was left of it. Most of it had caved in, looked like snow had broken the roof the winter after I'd left. I set up the van so it faced the tree line, just like last time. I left the engine off. No heater. No distractions. I needed silence. That first night was quiet. No footsteps, no knocks, just frost crawling up the windows like veins. But I didn't sleep. I sat with the recorder in my hand and whispered into it whenever I felt my mind slipping. That's what it wanted, after all. The slipping. The second night, I started to feel the shift. The air turned metallic, the kind of cold that doesn't sting, it paralyzes. And the fire wouldn't stay lit. I used dry wood, even soaked it in accelerant. It would spark, flare, and then die. No smoke, no embers, just death. I went back into the van, locked it, sat in silence, and then I heard it again. Not outside, inside me. My voice, a whisper so faint it might have just been my own thoughts saying, "Give up." I wrote it down in the notebook, not to document it, to trap it. That became my ritual. Every thought that wasn't mine, I wrote it. Every whisper, every flicker of darkness, I wouldn't let it float around unspoken. I'd trap it in ink, and I'd speak back. No. That word became my anchor. No, I will not forget who I am. No, I will not feed this thing. No, I will not be hollow. The third night, it came. Not a vision, not a whisper, the creature. I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of the van door handle, not jiggling, not pulling, turning, as if something with long, deliberate fingers was checking to see if I'd made a mistake, if I'd left it unlocked. I hadn't. But the pressure on the door kept building, like it wanted in. I sat frozen, holding the notebook tight to my chest. Then it knocked 3 times, and I didn't move, because this time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. It stood outside the van for what felt like hours. I couldn't see it. Not really. I didn't open the blinds. I didn't peer out through the frost. I didn't need to. I could feel it in the pressure against the door, in the way the air went still, like the entire forest had stopped breathing. That's how it works. The Wendigo doesn't scream. It doesn't rush. It waits for the invitation, for you to crack. But I didn't speak. Not to it. I spoke to myself, softly, calmly, my name, my past, my memories. I recited the lyrics to songs I loved, recalled the smell of summer on the coast, the grit of sand under the VW's tires, the laugh of my sister when we were kids, the moment I bought the van. The first time I camped under a sky so clear it hurt to look at. Every word, a shield. I would not forget who I was. I would not give in, and that's when it began to howl. Low at first, like something groaning through its teeth, then rising, warped, unnatural, wrong. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't human. It was a hunger that learned to mimic grief. It howled with all the pain it had stolen, and I almost let it in. Almost. I gripped the notebook tighter and shouted, "No. Stop." It stopped. Silence. For the first time, I could hear my own breath again. I was shaking, teeth chattering from more than cold, but I was there. Still me. I opened the notebook one last time. I didn't write a description. I didn't sketch claws or eyes or shadows. I wrote one sentence: "You don't get to have me." And with that, the pressure lifted. The van door stopped rattling. The cold began to feel normal again. Not warm, not comfortable, but real. The unnatural edge of it had dulled. The woods were still dark, the snow still deep, but it wasn't watching anymore. It had left, or maybe it had lost. I stayed one more day to be sure, made a fire the old-fashioned way, walked the tree line, no tracks, no prints, no blood, just the forest, still and indifferent, as it should be. When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't pump my fist or cry or take a victory photo. I felt quiet, like a war had ended inside me. Because that's what it was, a war of identity, a battle of memory against consumption, a hunger that didn't just want flesh, it wanted me to forget who I was and become something else. But I didn't, and I never will. That was 4 years ago. I still camp, still drive the Volkswagen, though it's rusted in places and the stove only works when it feels like it. I still visit forests, even in the winter, but I don't run anymore. Because I've learned something most people never have to. That the scariest thing out there isn't a creature in the woods. It's the moment when the voice in your head starts to sound like something else, when the cold wraps around your spine and tells you to give in, to stop fighting, to vanish into the trees. It's subtle. Creeping, not a roar, but a whisper. And in that moment, what saves you isn't a weapon or a heater or a plan. It's memory. It's choice. The Wendigo still exists, maybe not in body, maybe not even in one place. But the idea of it, what it represents, that's real. It's every voice that says you're not enough. Every echo of trauma that tells you to stay small. Every moment you feel alone in the dark, too scared to move forward, and too ashamed to call for help. It feeds on that. But it also depends on one thing, that you'll stop resisting. So don't give up your name. Don't give up your story. Don't give up your fire. There's power in remembering who you are when everything tries to make you forget. And sometimes the only way out of the dark is to walk straight into it. Eyes open, notebook in hand, and whisper back, "Not today." I used to think the worst thing that could happen at a campground was a busted water hookup or a late-night thunderstorm pounding the roof of my Volkswagen Westphalia. That was before the fall of 2021, before that last trip up into the Northern Rockies, before I understood that there are places out there where nature watches you back, where the forest doesn't just whisper, it remembers. It started like any other solo trip. I just wrapped up a brutal 3-month stretch at work in Seattle. I was fried mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I needed the stillness. You know that kind of stillness only the deep woods can offer? Where there's no signal, no city lights, no demands from anyone. Just trees, wind, your own breath. That's what I was chasing. So I packed up my old '89 Westie, did my standard pre-trip checks, and aimed for Glacier National Park. I'd been through there before, but never camped solo on the eastern fringe, the less trafficked side near the Blackfeet Reservation. The sun was setting earlier by then, and the chill in the air had a bite to it, perfect for campfires, reading by lantern light, and finally just letting go of the noise. The drive up was uneventful. I stopped in Kalispell for supplies, coffee, propane, extra bear spray, just in case. Locals told me the grizzlies had been active late that year, but I wasn't green. I knew how to lock up food, keep a clean sight, stay alert. Still, they gave me that look, half curious, half concerned, the kind people give when they're not sure whether to warn you harder or let you learn for yourself. I settled on a small, primitive campground called Two Moons Flat. Just 5 or 6 sites tucked back off a gravel road you'd miss if you blinked. No cell service, no RV hookups, just a pit toilet and a hand pump for water. That's what I wanted. Just me, the van, the trees. I pulled into site number 3 right before dusk. Pines thick on all sides. No other campers. That first night was beautiful. There's something sacred about lighting a fire in the dark, the way it crackles and dances like it's trying to speak its own language. I cooked a simple dinner, beans and rice, pan-fried sausage, washed up, locked everything in the van, and stretched out under the stars. I slept like the dead. But it didn't stay quiet. It was the second night when things started to feel off. Not loud, not obvious, just something subtle, like the woods were holding their breath. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up. Not from a sound exactly, more like a feeling. You know that sensation when your body knows something before your mind catches up? My eyes popped open and I just laid there, frozen under my blanket, listening. The wind had died down and everything was still. Too still. No rustling, no owls, not even the usual night chirps. Like the whole forest had gone mute. I reached over and grabbed my flashlight, but I didn't turn it on. I didn't want to announce myself. Instead, I peeked out the window curtain just an inch. Scanning the dark, there was nothing, just trees and darkness. But I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. The next morning, I found something strange. Just outside the van, maybe 5 feet from the sliding door, the pine needles had been disturbed. At first, I thought maybe it was an animal, a raccoon or something, but no tracks, just a large circular patch where the needles had been cleared away, like someone sat there, watching. I told myself it was nothing, maybe wind, maybe my imagination, maybe a deer. Still, I packed up the site tighter that day, kept my bear spray clipped to my belt, even during breakfast. I went for a long hike to shake the feeling, took the east trail out past Shadow Ridge, crossed a small creek that glistened like silver in the autumn light. I didn't see another soul for hours, which I normally loved. But something had shifted inside me. Every crack of a branch made my stomach twitch. Every gust of wind felt like breath on my neck. When I got back to camp around 4 p.m., the sun was already dipping low, golden through the trees. I tried to laugh it off, told myself I was just being paranoid. But when I reached my van, something made my heart drop straight through my boots. The passenger door was open, not wide, just barely ajar, like someone had tested it. I always locked the van. Always. I triple-checked before every hike. The lock wasn't broken. Nothing was stolen. Nothing moved. But the fact that it was open, it meant someone had been there. While I was deep in the woods, I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lantern low and the windows uncovered. Every sound outside felt amplified. The creaking of the trees, the scurry of something small. But then came something else. Something that didn't fit. It was soft at first, like a voice maybe, a distant hum, high-pitched. I sat up in the van, heart hammering, straining to hear. Then, knock, once. Just a single slow knock on the back of the van. I didn't breathe. Another knock. 2 this time. Rhythmic. Then silence. I grabbed the bear spray and slowly opened the sliding door. Nothing but dark forest and the soft beam of my flashlight catching the mist in the air. No movement, no prints, no sound. The knocks didn't come again, but sleep was impossible. I sat there until dawn, knees tight to my chest, bear spray in one hand, knife in the other. By morning, I was done. I'd never bailed early on a camping trip before, but this time I didn't even pack breakfast. I loaded up the van and turned the ignition with shaking fingers. The engine roared to life, and I've never been more relieved to hear it. But I never made it out. Half a mile from camp, the road forked. Only, it shouldn't have. There was only one way in and out of Two Moons Flat. But now, ahead of me, the gravel split left and right into 2 nearly identical roads, and there were no signs. I stopped the van and got out, heart racing. I walked a few feet down the right fork, scanning the trees, looking for familiar landmarks. Nothing. Then I tried the left. Still nothing. No tire tracks, no footprints, not even animal prints. It was as if the road had just grown another limb overnight. I stood there, frozen, staring at those 2 roads as if they were mouths, each waiting to swallow me whole. That's when I saw something hanging from a low branch. A string, a single red string, tied tight around the base of a pine bough. No tag, no marker, just a red thread fluttering in the breeze. And just like that, I was back in the van, backing up fast, gravel flying. I turned around and sped back toward the campground, thinking I must have taken a wrong turn somehow. But when I got back, my campsite was gone. Not just packed up, gone. No fire ring, no pull-in, no pit toilet. Just forest, like it had never existed. And right then I realized something terrifying. I wasn't lost, I was somewhere else, somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I can't describe the way panic feels when it comes in slow, when it starts not as a scream, but as a whisper in your gut. I was staring at a forest that looked exactly like the one I had camped in, but it wasn't. My site, R3, had a rock fire ring, 2 stumps I'd used as chairs, and a hand pump about 20 yards off to the left. I knew it like the back of my hand, and now there was nothing, not a trace. I backed the van up further. Maybe I was disoriented. Maybe the road had curved in the night and I'd come in at a weird angle. I drove slowly, eyes darting across the tree line, looking for any landmark that would set my mind at ease. But the deeper I drove, the less things made sense. The trees were the same, but older somehow. Gnarled. The forest floor was covered in thick moss where it had been mostly pine needles before. And the sky, it was too quiet. No wind, no birds. Just that strange, high-pitched hum lingering at the edge of my hearing, like a mosquito I couldn't swat. I hit the brakes when I saw it. A structure, maybe 50 yards off the road. It was small, looked like an old ranger shack, though it hadn't been maintained in decades. The wood was gray with rot, and one shutter hung at an awkward angle like a broken limb. I didn't remember seeing it on any maps, and it sure as hell wasn't part of the Two Moons flat listing, but I was desperate. Maybe someone inside could tell me where I was. Maybe I wasn't going insane. I killed the engine and stepped out. The air felt thick, like the atmosphere was pressing against my skin. I took a few steps toward the building, bear spray ready, boots crunching dead twigs underfoot. The door was slightly ajar. I called out, "Hello? Anyone in there?" Silence. I pushed the door open. The inside was even more decayed than it looked. Dust floated in shafts of pale light, a broken cot in one corner, a small rusted wood stove in the other, but it was the back wall that made my blood run cold. Carvings, hundreds of them, names, dates, phrases, all etched into the wood like tally marks on a prison wall. Some were scratched deep, violently, others neat, careful, but they all told the same story. People had been here, people who didn't expect to be, and some of them never left. One message caught my eye. If you hear the knocking, don't answer. Under it, a date, September 12th, 1996. I backed out of the shack, heart pounding. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but I wasn't sticking around to become a story etched on that wall. I raced back to the van, slammed the door, and started the engine. This time, I took the left fork. The gravel was rougher here, more overgrown. The trees felt closer, like they were folding in on the road. The van rattled and groaned as I pushed it faster than I should have. Then the radio flicked on. I hadn't touched it. Hell, I hadn't used the radio all trip. But now it was on, tuned to static, with a soft, almost whispering voice buried beneath the white noise. I leaned forward, trying to make it out. "Don't stay. Road bends back." And then it cut off. Dead silence. I slammed the heel of my hand into the dashboard. No, you're not doing this to me. The road curved ahead, but instead of opening into the highway or even another junction, it twisted right back around and dumped me again at that same fork. Left and right. Red string still fluttering from the pine branch. I screamed. I lost it. I pounded the steering wheel and screamed until my voice cracked. This wasn't just being lost. This wasn't nature playing tricks. This felt intentional. Something was keeping me here. I shut off the van, stepped outside, and walked straight into the woods. No trail, no direction. I just knew I had to get off that road. I walked for what felt like hours. The trees didn't thin. The light didn't change. The forest was a constant, unblinking eye. Eventually, I came to a clearing, and in the center was a tent. A faded, weather-beaten canvas dome, half collapsed, surrounded by scattered gear. I approached cautiously. Nothing moved. I checked the tags. Brand was from the early 2000s. The gear was sun-bleached, old, but inside was a journal, water-stained, with most of the pages stuck together, but a few were readable. The entries started normal. A couple, Mark and Denise, camping off-grid, September 2003. Then came the shift. We keep hearing something knocking at night. At first, we thought it was a woodpecker. The road doesn't go where it's supposed to. It loops back. Denise is scared. I told her it's just a forest trick. Something followed us. Denise says she saw it standing in the trees. No face, just dark. The last entry was barely legible, scrawled and smeared. Whatever you do, don't take the right road twice. That was it. I dropped the journal like it was burning. My skin crawled. I was shaking now, full-body tremors, like the fear had finally seeped into my bones. I needed to go back to the van. I needed to find the way out, any way out. But when I turned around, the path was gone. There was no trail behind me, no broken branches, no footprints, just dense, endless trees in all directions. And that's when I heard it again. Knock. One. Loud, clear, right behind me. I turned, flashlight slicing through the clearing. Nothing. Knock, knock. Slower. Closer. I didn't wait. I ran. Branches whipped my face, roots caught my boots. I stumbled, fell, got back up. My lungs were on fire. I didn't care. I just ran until I saw the glint of metal through the trees. The van. It was sitting there, alone, headlights off, doors shut tight, just like I'd left in it. I dove in, locked the doors, turned the key. This time, it started. I didn't care which road I took. I hit the gas and didn't let up, tires skidding, dust exploding behind me. I don't know how long I drove. An hour? 2? The trees never changed. But then, slowly, they did. The light shifted, the road straightened, and suddenly, I hit pavement. I was back on Route 49, blinking against the brightness of the afternoon sun. I pulled over and sobbed, real, ugly sobs. I'd made it out. Somehow, I don't know what I passed through, what I crossed into, but it wasn't just a campground. It was a trap, something old, something watching. And not everyone makes it out. I never went back to that area. I never reported it either. What would I say? That the forest moved? That a campground disappeared? That something knocked on my van in the dark? People wouldn't believe me. But if you're watching this and you're the kind who loves the silence of deep woods and off-grid campsites, just remember one thing. When the forest goes quiet, listen, because if you hear a knock at night, don't answer. I used to think the cold was just a part of life up north, something you learn to brace for, joke about, even find beauty in. That crisp silence, the weight of snowfall on pine branches, the way your breath hangs like a ghost in front of your face. I loved winter, I really did. Until that January in Michigan when it turned on me, when it isolated me, then watched me, then hunted me. My name's Connor. I was 34 that winter, still pretty new to full-time RV living, just a year and change in. I had this beat-up, retrofitted Volkswagen Westfalia I picked up from a guy in Ohio who'd been restoring it with his son. Paid in cash, drove it off the same day. There was something comforting about it. Simple, manual, no bells and whistles, just you and the road. It gave me distance from things I wasn't ready to face. Divorce, debts, the death of a close friend. I wasn't running away. Not exactly. Just driving until something started to feel like peace. That January, I'd planned to head south, New Mexico, maybe Arizona, but I'd stopped to visit a friend near Traverse City for New Year's. What was supposed to be a 2-night visit turned into 2 weeks after a snowstorm iced over half the state. By the time I left, the sky was clear, but the roads were still lined with snowbanks taller than my van. I didn't want to drive straight through the night, and I didn't want to sleep in another Walmart parking lot. So I checked one of my camping apps and found a semi-remote site just outside the Huron-Manistee National Forest. It had a few winter-accessible spots with plowed gravel pads, solar restrooms, and good reviews. Quiet, peaceful, never crowded. The name of the place? Stag Rock Campground. I should have known by the name. Should have trusted that itch in my gut when I turned off the main road and saw the sign, weather-worn and leaning, half covered in snow. But it was late, I was tired, and it looked safe enough. There were only 3 other campers parked across the loop, all spaced far apart, mostly smaller rigs. No lights on, no movement. I backed into a site shaded by tall evergreens, their limbs heavy with snow. Turned off the engine. Silence dropped like a curtain. Just the ticking of my cooling engine and the soft creak of trees adjusting to the weight. I cooked dinner on the camp stove inside the van. Simple stuff, a can of soup, and some crackers. My heater was one of those safe propane units with a CO detector, but I still cracked a window out of habit. As the wind picked up, the temperature dropped into the teens. I wasn't worried. I had supplies, a full tank of propane, enough food for a few days. Cell signal wasn't strong, but I had a battery bank and enough juice to keep things running. That first night, I fell asleep fast. Full belly, warm blanket, the usual playlist playing soft in my earbuds. But something woke me just before 3 a.m., a sound I couldn't place. Not sharp, not loud, but wrong. I pulled out the earbuds, listened. At first, nothing. Then there it was again. Crunch, snow, being compressed slowly, carefully. Not a deer, too deliberate, not wind, too rhythmic. Footsteps. I held my breath. They circled the van, not rushed, not clumsy, just slow. one crunch at a time, pausing, shifting. I waited, every muscle frozen. I thought maybe it was a person, someone drunk, disoriented, maybe trying to find their rig, but I never heard a voice. No cough, no call, no breath, just the steps. And then tapping. 3 light taps against the back window. Not a knock, more like claws. Scraping lightly, testing the glass. I didn't move, I didn't speak. I just lay there, eyes wide in the dark, listening. The footsteps moved on, a long pause, then another tap, this time on the side window, right next to my head. I grabbed my knife, pulled my blanket tighter, my mind was racing. What the hell was that? Eventually the sounds stopped, or maybe I blacked out, I don't know. But when I woke again, the sun was up, weak and gray through the trees. I stepped outside, half convinced I'd imagined it all, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. Not human, not deer, not any animal I recognized. Deep, elongated prints, each one sunk twice as deep as my own, almost like hoof marks but split strangely. Uneven, wrong, and they went around my van, twice, then off into the woods behind my sight. I followed them for a few yards before the trees grew too thick and the prints just vanished. No backtrack, no break in stride, just gone. I walked the loop to see if anyone else had heard or seen something. But all the other campers, gone. Their sites were empty, not just vacant. Chairs still set out, one fire pit still smoking faintly, but no rigs, no people, and only one set of fresh tire tracks besides mine, like they'd packed up fast and never looked back. I tried calling out. No response. That's when I noticed the silence again. No birds, no wind, no snow falling, just that weird, pressing quiet, the kind that makes you feel like someone's holding their breath right behind you. I went back to the van, locked up, sat in the driver's seat with the engine running, told myself I'd leave as soon as I'd had some coffee. But then the snow started again, thick, heavy, fast. Within 20 minutes, visibility was cut in half. The road looked like a white wall. My tires were already partially buried. I checked my phone, no signal. Not just low, 0. Even the emergency bar was gone. Just like that, I was alone, snowbound, and something had been watching me last night. Something that left prints no animal should have made. I tried to tell myself it was just a storm, just a fluke of bad timing and cheap signal. Just some strange animal prints I didn't recognize. Maybe a moose, maybe snow distortion. I'd read about that, how prints change shape as snow settles and melts. That had to be it. But the truth was, I was already spiraling. There's something about cold that's not just physical. It's emotional. It seeps into your decisions, your memories, your gut instincts. Everything slows down, stiffens. Even fear starts to freeze. You stop reacting and start enduring. And that's exactly what I did. I decided to wait it out. 1 night, maybe 2. I still had food, propane, water. No one knew I was there exactly, but I told my friend I'd be heading south. He'd check in if I didn't text by the weekend. That gave me a buffer. But that thing, whatever it was, had been real. And it hadn't come by accident. So I stayed inside. That whole day, I didn't leave the van. I kept the curtains drawn. I boiled water, ate granola, dozed with one eye open. By dusk, the snow had stopped. The forest outside was blanketed, heavy, a fresh coat over everything. You'd never know anything had walked through it. Until just after midnight, I heard it again. First, the wind, low, groaning through the pines, then that same rhythmic crunching. Not rushed, not human, just steady, approaching. It stopped near the van. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. Then came the sound that still lives in my bones. Sniffing. Slow, deliberate inhalations, long draws of breath right outside the panel door like it was smelling me, and then words, not loud, not fluent, not even fully human. Just a string of guttural, choked syllables. My name, or close to it, drawn out in that voice like broken branches and dry leaves, like something mimicking the way humans speak, but just off enough to make your stomach turn. I squeezed the handle of my knife. My throat was dry. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it would give me away. Another sound, closer this time. A claw dragging across the metal siding, slow, like a warning, like a caress. And then nothing. I stayed frozen until the sky outside turned pale gray again. I don't remember falling asleep. When I finally stepped out again, morning light cut through the pines, casting long shadows across the snow. And right there, beneath the side window where I'd heard the sniffing, was something worse than the prints. A handprint, elongated, inhuman, with claw tips at the end, pressed into the frost like it had been made from steam or heat. It shouldn't have been possible. Frost doesn't imprint like that. But there it was, still glistening in the sun, and beside it, scratched into the snow-packed dirt, was a symbol. A spiral, jagged, almost like a snare or maze. I didn't recognize it, but I felt it in my chest, wrong, ancient. That's when I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I packed up the van in less than 15 minutes. Didn't even bother folding my bedding. Just threw everything inside, cranked the heat, and backed out of the site. The main road was buried. There were no plow lines, no fresh tracks, no sign that anyone had been through in days. But I didn't care. I put it in low gear and started creeping forward, windshield wipers brushing the snow as fast as it fell. About a half-mile in, the road narrowed into a canopy of bent trees, snow-laden pines curving overhead like the mouth of a tunnel. And that's when I saw her, middle of the road, pale, barefoot, standing still in the snow. A girl, maybe 12, wearing what looked like a torn sundress. Her skin was bluish, her lips cracked, her arms hung at her sides like they didn't work right. And her head was tilted too far, almost 90 degrees, like it had been broken and left that way. I slammed on the brakes. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I was paralyzed. My hand hovered over the gear shift, ready to reverse. Then she raised one hand and pointed. Behind me. I whipped my head around, heart slamming. Nothing, just forest, snow, and then a shape at the edge of the trees. Tall, gaunt, bone-colored. It stepped forward, and I swear to God, it had no eyes, just deep, hollow sockets and a mouth too wide, hanging open in silent laughter. Its arms were too long, its fingers touched the ground, its breath fogged the air and burst like it was panting. But it made no sound. I floored it. The girl vanished the moment I passed through her. Like snow kicked up in headlights. I didn't stop driving for 2 hours. Eventually I hit a plowed road, found a ranger station, banged on the door until someone answered. I must have looked half feral, red-eyed and shaking. The ranger brought me inside, gave me coffee, didn't ask questions at first. When I finally told him where I'd camped, he went very still. You said Stag Rock? I nodded. He sighed. Looked out the window. That campground's not open in winter, he said. Hasn't been for years. I told him I'd seen other campers. He shook his head. You didn't. I insisted. I'd seen rigs, fire pits still warm, one camper still smoking. He leaned forward. Listen, that part of the forest, it's not right. Locals don't go there, not even in summer. You'll see tents, fire pits, sometimes even people, but they're not alive, son. I stared at him. Not alive? He didn't blink. Something there imitates, borrows, lures, then it waits. Sometimes it lets you leave. Sometimes it follows. I asked him what it was. He said the word so soft I almost didn't hear it. Wendigo. I didn't say anything at first, just sat there, staring into the steam curling off my coffee. The word rang in my head like a bell in a deep well. Wendigo. I'd heard it before, once years ago when I was still a kid in Scouts. One of those campfire legends the older boys told just to get under your skin. Something about spirits in the woods, cannibalism, a creature that grew stronger the hungrier it got. But this ranger, he wasn't telling a story. He was giving a warning. You need to go, he said finally. Far. South if you can. Don't stop until you feel warmth on your skin again. I blinked. You're serious? His eyes didn't waver. I've worked here 33 years. I've seen things I wish I could forget. I've taken reports from campers who went in with 5 people and came out with 2 who didn't remember losing the others. I've found tents zipped up from the inside, nothing inside but blood and claw marks. And I've followed tracks that circled themselves until they vanished into thin air. He stood slowly, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a faded map. Marked in red ink was a large circular zone around the forest, maybe 15 miles wide. People disappear here, he said. They always have. You can explain a few. Weather, animals, exposure, but not all. Not like this. He circled the red zone with a thick black pen. Don't come back. I left the ranger station without another word. It was early afternoon by the time I was on the main highway. I drove for 8 straight hours, stopping only to refuel. That night, I parked outside a truck stop in Ohio, just surrounded by semi-trailers and bright overhead lights. Even then, I couldn't sleep, because what that ranger said kept echoing in my head. Sometimes it lets you leave, sometimes it follows. That word, follows, stuck in me like a splinter. So I did what I shouldn't have. I researched. I dug through forums, old Reddit threads, urban legend blogs, local missing persons reports. I found articles about Huron-Manistee disappearances going back decades. In almost every case, winter months, isolated campsites, no signs of forced entry, most never solved, some never even investigated. But what chilled me were the first-hand accounts. People describing the same exact details I'd seen. Elongated prints, figures standing in the snow, imitation voices, symbols scratched into the ground. And worse, what came after? One guy claimed he moved to Arizona and still saw it sometimes, in his dreams at first. Then, outside his window. Another said it waited until they forgot, then struck again years later. All of them shared a warning. Once it knows you, it doesn't forget. I stopped driving south. I stopped driving anywhere for a while. I parked in a KOA in Kentucky and stayed put for a month. Daylight only. Crowds. Security cameras. I didn't tell anyone, not my sister, not the friend I'd stayed with in Traverse, not the online RV forums. Because how do you explain to people that you were sniffed at by something that shouldn't exist? That some said your name through a mouth that didn't belong to any living thing? How do you explain the smell that lingered in the van afterward, no matter how much you cleaned? Rot, wet fur, something like burnt hair, or the way your dreams start to mimic your memories, except twisted, off, like something's practicing your life from the inside out for a while? I convinced myself it was over. Just a nightmare, a combination of isolation and fear, a dark winter hallucination, until the knocking started again. 3 soft taps, right on the back window. Same rhythm, same tone, not demanding, just curious. It was in Georgia when it happened, in the middle of a warm March night, not snow, no forest, just a dusty patch of trees near the Okefenokee. It found me again. I didn't look out the window that time, didn't move, but the next morning, claw marks, fresh, precise, and that symbol again, drawn in red Georgia clay. I called the ranger station back in Michigan, just once. No one answered. I called again 2 days later. Disconnected. I don't think it was just a number change. I think they buried it, covered it up, pretended it never happened. And maybe that's what scares me most. Not the creature itself, not even the fact that it can mimic, follow, learn. It's that it can exist in silence. That it feeds on our disbelief, that it's patient. We live in a world that wants reasons. Proof, patterns, but some things slip through. Some things you only survive if you feel them early enough, if you listen when your instincts scream, don't open the door. It doesn't care about your GPS. It doesn't care about your signal strength or your campfire stories. It waits for you to be alone, to doubt yourself, to settle in. That's when it whispers your name. It's been a year. 12 months since I parked beneath those pines thinking I'd found peace. 12 months since I heard my own name come out of something that wasn't human. I still live in the van, same wheels, same engine hum. But I don't call it freedom anymore. I call it motion. I call it survival. I stick to warmer states now, Texas, New Mexico, southern Utah. I stay near people, cameras, lights. I keep salt by the windows. An old man I met in Flagstaff told me to hang bones above the door, so I did. Coyote bones, cleaned and bleached. I don't know if it helps. I don't know if anything does. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about fear. Not the cheap kind, not jump scare fear. I'm talking about deep fear, the kind that settles behind your ribs and becomes part of your body. It changes how you look at the world. Every time I hear a twig snap in the dark, I freeze. Every time the wind picks up and rattles the siding, I flinch. Every time I meet someone new on the road, I study their eyes a little too long just to be sure they blink like I do. There are nights I dream of snow again, nights I hear her voice, soft, childish, like it's learning speech for the first time. Connor, I wake up sweating, breathless. Reach for the knife I keep taped to the wall near my bed. There's never anything there. But the fear doesn't fade. Because this wasn't just a story. This wasn't just a ghost or a bear or a strange moment in the woods. This was something older than logic, older than maps. Something that doesn't need to chase you because it knows you'll return eventually. In your thoughts, in your nightmares, in the slow crawl of memory when you're finally still again. And that's the lesson it left me with. Not some heroic survival tale, not a checklist of how to outsmart the wilderness, just this: never camp where the silence feels wrong. Never stay just because you want it to be safe, and never ignore the part of you that knows something is watching even when you can't see it. Because we're not built to survive everything. We're built to feel first. And the second you stop listening to that instinct, that's when it starts learning your name. I've thought about selling the van, getting a place with walls, locks, neighbors, but the truth is, it wouldn't matter. This thing, whatever it is, it doesn't live in the forest. It lives in isolation. It lives in you once you've touched that kind of fear. So I keep moving because I've learned that the scariest thing out here, it's not what's waiting in the trees. It's the moment you finally convince yourself there's nothing there. That's when you're no longer just a traveler, you're prey. And out here on the road, in the wilderness, under endless stars, you are always being watched by something that never forgets the taste of your fear. So go. Camp. Explore. But don't be stupid. Don't laugh off stories just because you haven't seen them yet. Respect the land. Trust the silence. And whatever you do, if you hear someone call your name in the dark, don't answer. It was the silence that got to me first. Not the scenic kind of silence, not the peaceful hush you expect when you're surrounded by pine trees and sleeping deer. No, this silence had weight to it. A vacuum. Like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something awful to arrive. I'd been to dozens of campgrounds across the U.S., traveled thousands of miles in my Volkswagen Westphalia, tasted freedom under desert stars and mountain rain alike. But this trip, this one was different from the moment my tires crunched into that gravel road. I should have trusted my gut. But that's the thing about instincts. They whisper when you want them to scream. I was heading into northern Idaho, chasing the tail end of autumn, trying to outrun the first heavy snow. I'd heard about a place called Dead Man's Ridge. Didn't show up on many official maps, but it passed through forums, word of mouth, the kind of places VW campers talk about in low voices. It wasn't even a proper campground, more like a stretch of open national forest land that you could boondock on, assuming you didn't mind the isolation. That was the draw, actually. The promise of unfiltered quiet. No hookups, no rangers, no cell signal. Just the trees, the cold, and whatever you brought with you. I'd just turned 34. Still felt like I was running from something, though I couldn't have told you what. A breakup, maybe. Or maybe the dull panic that I was wasting my life, moving from one beautiful place to another with nothing anchoring me. I figured Deadman's Ridge would be a good spot to sit with that feeling. Let it settle, or dissolve, one way or another. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The last gas station before the ridge was a squat, flickering place called Rocky Flats. The kind of place where everything smelled like diesel and old coffee, and the guy behind the counter didn't ask where you were headed unless he wanted to tell you not to. That's exactly what happened. He was maybe in his late 60s, bald, with the kind of faded tattoos that said he'd lived a full, dangerous life before retiring to backcountry Idaho. "You camping out that way?" he asked, nodding toward the ridge when I mentioned my route. "Planning to. Just for a couple nights," he grunted. "Planning ain't the same as knowing. You alone?" I hesitated. I always hated that question, especially as a solo traveler, but I nodded. Look, he said, lowering his voice. There's no patrol out there. It's unmaintained, no cell towers, no ranger station for a dozen miles. Every couple years, someone gets lost out there. Hunters, campers. Sometimes they find them, sometimes they don't. You think it's dangerous? He met my eyes. I think people don't listen to the land. They treat it like a photo op, but some places, they don't want you there. That should have been enough. But it wasn't, because I'm stubborn and maybe a little desperate. So I thanked him, bought a black coffee that tasted like wood varnish, and drove out anyway. The road narrowed fast after that. First pavement, then gravel, then dirt, climbing in tight switchbacks through dense pine. The deeper I got, the darker it felt. Not just because of the tree cover, either. It was like the light stopped trying halfway up the hill. The sun would hit the windshield, but the forest soaked it up before it reached the forest floor. I found a clearing maybe 4 miles in, flat, semi-secluded, perched just above a steep drop-off that overlooked a dry riverbed. Perfect in theory. Enough space to park, cook, and breathe. But even as I set up camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not directly. More like the woods themselves were holding something back, like it was waiting to see what kind of person I was before deciding whether to show me mercy. Still, I tried to settle in, cooked a can of beans, unrolled my sleeping bag, lit a small fire, and watched the last of the orange sky drain out through the trees. No noise, no birds, not even the skittering of squirrels. Just wind, but not normal wind. Gusts that seemed to come from nowhere. That pushed and then stopped suddenly, like something pacing, circling. I slept inside the van that night, locked the doors, kept the curtains half drawn. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke up. I remember the time exactly because my old Casio watch glowed in the dark. I wear it like a comfort item, something I've had since I was a teenager. Never stopped ticking, never needed a reason. I didn't wake because of a sound. I woke because of the absence of one. A complete void. No air movement, no outside noise, not even the creak of the van's frame adjusting in the cold. And then a knock. Not loud, just deliberate. One knock on the rear window. I froze. My van's back hatch was tinted, but there was a curtain drawn too. I hadn't left anything outside, no trees close enough to sway and hit it, and it hadn't been windy. Another knock. I don't know how long I held my breath. Long enough that my chest hurt. I thought maybe an animal, a raccoon, a deer. But then I heard it, a voice, low, male, whispered just above the van's rear wheel. Let me in. Not shouted, not pleaded, just said like it was obvious, like I already knew him, like he had a right. Let me in. I scrambled for the driver's seat, my hand shaking on the ignition. I fumbled for the flashlight, clicked it on, nothing outside the windshield but empty woods and mist. I started the engine. Headlights flared, throwing the clearing into brutal white light. Nothing. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10. Eventually, I crawled back into the sleeping bag, never fully closing my eyes. The whisper didn't return, but I could still feel it, like the words had etched themselves into the metal of the van. The next morning, I stepped out into the mist with a baseball bat in one hand and the flashlight in the other. Checked around the van. No tracks, no footprints. Just crushed pine needles and the fading smoke trail from the fire. I should have left then. But fear is a strange thing. Sometimes it freezes you. Sometimes it dares you to stay. Like you're gambling with your own pride. I stayed, and that was my second mistake. By mid-morning, the air had warmed just enough to burn off the fog, but the silence stayed. I tried to tell myself it was just one of those things. The mind playing tricks when you're alone in the woods. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe a tree branch tapped the window, and I hallucinated the whisper in half sleep. That was easier to believe than the alternative. But I didn't dream the knock, and I damn sure didn't imagine the voice. Still, I stuck to the plan. I had a small hiking loop mapped out on my printed topo map, no GPS out there, and my phone was a brick in airplane mode. I figured a short trek might clear my head, shake whatever weird energy had followed me through the night. The trail wasn't marked, not really. just an old hunter's path that ran parallel to the ridge, then dipped into a moss-choked gully. I strapped on my boots, grabbed my day pack, left a note on the dash of the van just in case, and walked into the trees. You ever notice how sometimes a forest doesn't feel alive, just hollow? That's what it felt like something had stripped the place of motion. The trunks were too close together, gnarled and blackened in places like they'd been scorched long ago and forgot to die. I moved slow, careful, kept thinking I'd spot a deer or at least hear a bird. But there was nothing. About 45 minutes in, I found something I hadn't seen on any map. It was a structure, half collapsed, half swallowed by the woods. A small shack or outpost, probably built decades ago. The roof had caved in on one side, but the door was intact. Old wood. Heavy. There were rusty hooks nailed to the frame, the kind used for hanging lanterns or maybe tools. The strangest part? It looked used. Not recently, but not abandoned either. There were no spiderwebs across the entrance, no rot on the threshold, just dust. Quiet dust. As if someone had lived there, moved on, and time itself had stalled in their absence. I should have turned back. But curiosity is a powerful drug when you're alone. I opened the door. Inside, the smell hit me first. Dry mold and burnt cedar. The floor was warped, bowing inward at the center. There were shelves along one wall stacked with metal tins and broken glass jars. Something about it made my stomach tighten. It wasn't the decay. I'd seen plenty of old backcountry cabins. It was the arrangement. Too neat. Too intentional. Then I saw the etchings on the wall. Names. Dozens of them, scratched into the wood with something sharp. Some were full names, G. Holloway, Mira Jensen, Thomas, no last name. Others were just initials or dates. A few had been crossed out, not scratched lightly, gouged through until the names were barely legible. There was a date near the ceiling, 1998, and below that, the word returned. I backed out. Whatever that place was, it hadn't been built just for shelter. As I retraced my steps, I kept glancing over my shoulder. Every snapped twig made my pulse spike. Every gust of wind felt aimed at me. I no longer believed I was alone. I believed something had followed me from the shack, even if I couldn't see it. I made it back to the van just as the light began to dip again. Autumn up here is cruel that way. Short windows of brightness, then back to long dusk and colder dark. That night, I didn't light a fire. I stayed inside the van, locked every door. I kept my boots on. I didn't plan to sleep. Around midnight, I heard it again. Not a knock, a dragging sound. Along the passenger side of the van, like someone running a stick slowly across the paneling. Then a pause, then again. I shut off my lantern, pulled the curtain aside just a crack. There was nothing there. And then the driver's side mirror moved, just a twitch, as if someone had bumped it, then stepped back. But the van didn't shake, and that's when it hit me. Whatever was out there wasn't walking. It wasn't heavy. It moved too close to the van without any of the usual sounds. No gravel crunch, no displaced twigs. It was quiet in a way people aren't, and it knew how to stay just beyond the light. I turned the ignition, backed up fast, and drove down the dirt path maybe a quarter mile, just far enough that I could no longer see the clearing. I parked beside a cluster of boulders and kept the engine idling for an hour before finally cutting it off. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't the woods anymore. It was me, my mind, my sense of control. My confidence, that thing you need to have when you're traveling alone, when you're trusting your vehicle to be your only line of defense, was unraveling. And still, I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could outlast whatever this was. Or maybe I believed that whatever had shown itself to me wasn't ready to let me go. Sleep didn't come, but sunrise did. Weak, pale, half-hearted. I made coffee the next morning with shaking hands, opened the van's side door to get some air, and found something on the windshield. A feather, long, gray, with what looked like dried blood on the tip, and tucked beneath it, barely visible under the wiper blade, was a piece of torn brown paper. One word. Return. The same word carved in the shack. I didn't pack. I didn't even check the rearview mirror. I just drove. But the road didn't look the same. What should have been 4 miles of dirt path felt like 20. The curves were wrong. The trees were closer. At one point, I swore the road looped back on itself, but when I passed the old pine with the lightning scar, the one I'd seen on the way in, it was on the wrong side of the van. Something was twisting the way out. Something didn't want me to leave. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached, knuckles white against the faded leather. Every nerve in my body was lit up, like I was driving through the edge of something not entirely real. The forest wasn't just dense. It was pressing in, closing around me like lungs inhaling and forgetting how to let go. The road split, or at least I thought it did. That hadn't been there before. 2 narrow trails, one cutting downhill toward what looked like marshland, the other rising steeply into shadowed trees. I stopped the van, engine humming, breath fogging the windshield. I didn't know which way to go. My compass spun lazily on the dash as if confused too. I stepped out. I know. Dumb. But I had to look. I had to check for tire marks, signs of the way I'd come. The moment my boots hit the dirt, I noticed something strange. The smell. Not the usual pine or damp soil, but something sweeter. Sickly sweet, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. It hit the back of my throat and stayed there. And then I saw them. Footprints. Bare, human, leading from the edge of the woods directly to my van, then circling it. Not once. 3 times. Deep, deliberate prints in the soft dirt. No shoes. No animal shape, just long, wide human feet with an odd bend at the arch, almost as if broken mid-stride. I didn't follow them. I got back into the van and chose the right fork, heading uphill. The incline was steep. Too steep, really, but the van chugged along, loyal as ever. Trees blurred past the windows, black trunks flashing like prison bars. My breath was shallow. Every second I expected something, someone, to step onto the road, just a silhouette in the trees, just waiting for me to blink. I crested the hill, and just like that, it was gone. The woods opened. The road flattened. Sunlight, weak but real, poured through the branches. The air shifted. I recognized the smell of pine again, and something inside me loosened for the first time in hours. I pulled over, shut the engine off, and just sat there for a long time. But peace didn't follow. Relief didn't stick. I had this gnawing certainty that I'd made it out of the worst part of the woods, yes, but I hadn't left the danger behind. It had come with me. Or worse, it had already been inside the van. That's the thing about fear. Once it settles in, it doesn't need a reason to stay. I eventually found a new clearing. It looked harmless, wide, flat, sun-drenched, but I was too rattled to drive any farther, and I needed sleep. Real sleep. I told myself I'd keep watch. Maybe just rest my eyes for 20 minutes. I woke up 4 hours later. The van was cold, my mouth was dry, but nothing seemed out of place, until I noticed the driver's side window, not broken, not open, just smeared, a handprint, left in a thin film of something, oily, not blood, not dirt, something thicker, greasy almost. It ran down the glass in streaks, dragging fingernail lines along with it, and then something else. There, pressed into the dust of my dashboard, was a single feather, not like the one before. This one was black, curled, bent at the center like it had been crushed and carefully straightened out again, and beneath it, carved into the plastic of the dash, a symbol. A circle, with 3 vertical lines running through it, uneven, like claw marks, but too perfect to be accidental. I didn't recognize it, but something in my bones did. That was when I realized something had changed in me. The fear wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't panic. It had become familiar, like a voice I hadn't heard in years whispering my name in a room full of strangers, like a dream I couldn't quite remember but knew had ended badly. I started driving again. Didn't care where I was going, just away, toward pavement, civilization, lights, anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was counting the miles with me. Something patient, something ancient. It didn't need to chase me. It already knew where I'd go. It just needed to wait. I reached a ranger station by dusk, the first one I'd seen in days. It looked like Salvation, a squat wooden building with a tin roof and an American flag fluttering just outside. I ran inside. A young ranger, maybe late 20s, looked up, surprised. "You okay?" he asked. You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed. I actually laughed. A short, dry bark that didn't sound like me. "I don't know," I said. "I think something followed me." He didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped around the counter, led me to a chair, and got me some water. "You been up by Deadman's Ridge?" he asked. I nodded. "Jesus," he whispered. "You didn't camp, did you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He sat back, rubbing his jaw. "You're not the first. A couple years back, we had a guy go missing out there. Left his van, his gear, everything. Just gone. Last thing we found was a handprint on his back window." My stomach dropped. "What about the symbol?" I asked. I drew it on a napkin, the circle, the 3 vertical lines." He went pale. "I've seen that before. It's not in any tribal records, but the old-timers around here, they talk about something old, not a creature, not quite a spirit either, something that chooses people, leaves marks. Chooses them for what?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "To remember." "To remember what?" I asked. The ranger just looked at me, long and hard, like he was trying to figure out if I could handle the real answer or if I'd just break right there in his office chair. Then he stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out an old manila folder. Its corners were bent. The label on the front was so faded I could barely make out the word, "Unresolved Deadman's Ridge." Inside were half a dozen printed photos, grainy and scratched like they'd been copied from copies of copies. Each showed something left behind: a shoe in the middle of a road, a burned-out lantern still glowing faintly, an RV door torn open from the inside, and every single one had the same thing: the symbol, that circle, those 3 lines, burned into the side of a tree, etched in glass, scratched into metal. "This thing," the ranger said slowly, "doesn't always take people. Not right away. Sometimes it follows them, watches them for a while, leaves reminders, little signs, like it wants them to understand what's coming." He paused. "You ever heard of the Beckoner?" The name hit me like a punch to the ribs, not because I recognized it, but because something deep inside me did. "They say it lives where the land forgets time," he went on, "where the maps don't work and compasses spin. Doesn't move like we do, doesn't think like we do. It's not a ghost and it's not a monster. It's something else. Older. And once you've stepped into its space, once it's seen you, you don't walk away unchanged." He let that hang in the air for a while, then he leaned in and whispered, "It marks you." I left not long after. Didn't stay the night, just thanked him, got back in the van, and started driving. I didn't even know which direction I was going. Just away from the ridge, from the shack, from the prints, the mirror, the whispers. But I didn't feel better. In fact, I started to feel worse. You ever have that sensation like someone's sitting behind you, not close enough to touch you, but near enough that you feel their breath? I felt that, constantly, even as the miles ticked by, even as the trees thinned and the roads widened, and every once in a while, I'd glance at the rearview mirror and swear I saw something move behind me, not in the van, but in the reflection, like the forest wasn't done with me. I drove all the way to a KOA in another state, Tennessee, I think, paid cash, parked my van between 2 other campers, normal people, kids with scooters, people grilling hot dogs, and yet that night I still locked every door, pulled every shade. I sat in the dark with my flashlight clutched like a weapon. Around midnight, I heard it again, that whisper, same voice, just one word, remember. I jumped out of bed, threw open the sliding door, and shone the flashlight into the night. Nothing, just the picnic tables, just the other vans, just the breeze. But I know what I heard. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Just kept driving, rest stops, gas stations, slept sitting up in brightly lit parking lots. I tried to tell myself I was losing it, that fear had cracked something in me, that the woods had just gotten under my skin and I needed time. But then things started happening again. First, it was the black feather, found stuck under my windshield wiper at a rest area in Arkansas. Then a dead bird on my RV's roof, not mangled, not eaten, just placed there, laid flat like a gift. Then the dreams, the shack again, over and over, always the same. I walk in, the shelves are empty, the names are gone, but the floor is wet, thick with some dark fluid that smells like sap and iron, and there's someone or something standing in the far corner, facing the wall, not moving, not breathing, and in every dream it turns. I never see its face. I always wake up just before. I tried burning sage. Didn't help. I tried talking to a pastor in a town I passed through in Oklahoma. He listened, then asked if I'd been near a place that doesn't want to be known. That was his phrase. Said I needed to reclaim my path. That whatever found me wanted me lost. But the problem wasn't just the road. It was me. The fear wasn't external anymore. It was internal, a seed, growing. Even now, when I camp in normal spots, regular KOAs or well-lit state parks, I feel it, a low vibration in the bones of the van, a pressure behind my eyes, a quiet, waiting thing. And the signs keep coming. Sometimes it's that symbol drawn in dew on the window. Sometimes it's the sound of dragging. Not outside anymore, but inside, right beneath the floorboards. Sometimes it's the absence, the quiet. That same dead stillness I felt the night of the first knock. It's never gone. It's with me. I think that's the point. That ridge didn't want to kill me. Not directly. It wanted to mark me, to teach me how thin the veil is, between safe and unsafe, between natural and something else. And the more I try to run from it, the more it shows me I was never really alone out there. I don't tell most people about this. When I ask why I look tired, why I camp deep in the backwoods anymore, I just say, had a rough trip once. But truthfully, I think that trip never really ended. I left the ridge, drove off, but the thing that lived out there, the beckoner, it found a way inside. And now it doesn't need the woods to reach me. It uses memory, uses silence. It waits until I'm parked in some Walmart lot in Nevada, my van wedged between two semis, lights overhead buzzing like dying insects, and then it sends me a dream so vivid I wake up sweating, sure I've been gone for days. Or it waits until I'm driving some forgotten highway in Arizona, and my radio flickers on by itself, full volume, blaring a static that isn't just white noise, but something beneath it, like breathing, like words trying to crawl out. There's something I haven't admitted yet, something I haven't wanted to say out loud, because once I do, I can't take it back. Here it is. I went back. I don't even remember deciding to. One moment I was driving east, maybe toward New Mexico, and the next I was off the grid again, deep in the mountains, dirt under my tires, no signal, and a map that didn't match what I was seeing. I should have turned around, but my hands, they just kept steering. That was the most terrifying part. I wasn't possessed, not in the Hollywood sense. I still knew who I was, still knew I was in danger. But something in me wanted to go back, needed to. Like finishing a sentence that had been hanging midair for too long. I recognized the bend in the road first, then the collapsed bridge, then the shack, smaller than I remembered, but still exactly where I left it. Untouched, waiting, and I parked. Got out, no flashlight, just that cold, grim determination you get when you know you can't run anymore. The air felt different this time, not angry, not hostile, just expectant, like it had been holding its breath this whole time, and I had finally returned to let it exhale. The shack door wasn't shut anymore. It creaked open with a gentle push, and the smell hit me again, that wet earth, rotting fruit, static electric scent that doesn't belong to anything living. Inside, it had changed. The names were back, but this time they weren't burned. They were etched into the walls, carved cleanly, rows upon rows of them. Some names were ancient, faded to nothing. Some were fresh, new. I stepped forward, and that's when I saw mine. My name. Cut deep, still fresh, still red around the edges like the wood was bleeding. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just stared. Because in that moment, I understood this wasn't a warning. This wasn't punishment. It was acceptance. This place, this force, it doesn't destroy people outright. It consumes them slowly through awareness, through connection, through the need to understand. And I'd already taken too many steps down that road. I turned, and there, in the far corner, where the shadows collected like pooling water, something stood, not moving, not breathing, just watching. I couldn't see its face, not fully. But it had the outline of a man, or what used to be one. Arms too long, shoulders bent like wings, and where its head should have been, not horns, not hair, but branches, thin, black, reaching. I stepped back, it stepped forward. No sound, just motion, like it was gliding over the floor. And then it did something I will never, ever forget. It raised its hand, long, too many fingers, bent the wrong way, and tapped its chest. Once, twice. Then held its hand out to me. That's when I ran. Not like a coward, not like prey, but like someone who finally realized the forest doesn't hunt you, it welcomes you. And that is the danger. I don't remember getting back to the van, don't remember turning the key or driving for hours or how I got out of that place, but I made it somehow. Still breathing, still mine. But every day since, I've carried the weight of that choice, of going back, of standing in front of something that wasn't death, but invitation. And I said no, for now, because I don't think it's finished with me. Not really, not ever.